The story began with a strange and intense scene. A boy was standing in the middle of a place that looked like it was falling apart. All around him, buildings started to break down, as if the world itself was collapsing. The sky and air were blurry, filled with smoke and haze. The boy stared at his hands with wide eyes and felt shocked. In his mind, he thought he had returned to a place he had seen before. He remembered it clearly and thought he was back again at twilight, standing on a floating island covered in drifting smoke. The buildings around him had a Western style, but they were old and broken, as if no one had lived there for a very long time. Everything looked abandoned, silent, and empty. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. The boy saw a man standing in front of him. The man had blonde hair, a strong body, and eyes that were glowing strangely. He looked serious and powerful. With a sharp and commanding expression, the man told him to come closer. He said that he was waiting at the edge of the abyss, a deep and dangerous place. The moment felt unreal, like something out of a dream. Then the scene changed. The boy's eyes opened wide as he woke up suddenly from his sleep. He lay in bed, breathing deeply and trying to calm down. He felt confused and whispered to himself that it had been that strange dream again. While he was still thinking about it, he heard his mother's voice calling loudly from another room, reminding him that he would be late. She shouted his name, Sora. He replied quickly that he understood, but in his mind, he was still thinking about the man from the dream. Something about that person felt familiar. Sora had a strange feeling that he had seen him before in real life. Sora went to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. The mirror was foggy and covered with smoke from the hot water, so he wiped it with his hand until he could see his reflection clearly. While brushing his teeth, his mind was still thinking about the dream. He wondered what the abyss was. He thought maybe it was just a result of studying too much lately, and that his tired mind was making things up. He could not get the dream out of his head. As Sora stood there, lost in thought, his father came out of the bathroom. His father had just finished taking a shower and was rubbing his wet hair with a towel. With a friendly chuckle, he told Sora that he had overslept. Sora felt annoyed and replied with frustration, saying his father should not treat him like a little kid because he was already 15 years old. His father just laughed and told him that it did not matter because he still had a strong body. To prove it, he proudly showed off his muscles. Sora quickly looked away and said he did not want to see that, calling it gross. Then, he picked up a bottle and joked to himself that he wished he did not have to see his dad naked every morning in such a small apartment. His father, still cheerful, promised that one day he would buy a big house and let Sora live there. He added that when that happened, Sora and his younger brother Riku would finally have their own rooms. With his mouth full of water, Sora replied that his father had been saying the same thing for the past 5 years. His father just laughed again and said that their life had become much more fun after they joined the self-defense force in the army. Despite the teasing and small frustrations, there was warmth in their exchange, showing that their bond was strong even in their modest home. As Sora continued with his morning, he started thinking quietly to himself. He remembered that it had already been 3 years since his big brother joined the self-defense force. That memory made Sora think about his own future. He planned to join the army too, someday. He knew that when that time came, he would have to say goodbye to the lively and warm daily life he had now. He thought about his dad, who was a little unreliable but always full of energy and loved to joke around. He also thought about his mom, who sometimes looked scary and loud, but deep down, she really loved them all. Then Sora sat down at the dining table and let the peaceful moment sink in. He felt happy, like everything was just right. He wished this kind of life could stay the same forever. But deep inside, he also knew that the world would not stay like this. He had always believed the world would end someday, but what he never expected was how it would happen. Suddenly, the scene shifted again. Sora found himself standing in front of a massive structure called Tower Advent. The tower was tall and mysterious, and something about it gave him an uneasy feeling. He looked through a large glass window at the base of the tower, and quietly said to himself the numbers 0101, almost as if trying to understand something he did not fully remember. Back then, he had not known anything. But now, it was different. As he stared at the tower, he saw something unusual. Fighters, like small aircrafts, were flying toward it. Sora watched them with confusion. The sight made him think harder. He realized that this tower, which had suddenly risen from the ground, had the power to change the fate of all humanity. It was not just a building, it was something deeply connected to the strange dreams he had been having. A part of him already knew that the tower and the dreams were somehow linked. Then, another memory came back to him. He remembered sitting at the table with his parents. There had been a phone placed in the middle of the table, and through it, they had heard the voice of his brother. His brother had sounded calm and had told them that everything would be fine. He had said he would just follow the instructions given by the self-defense force and return home soon. Sora had believed those words back then. But now, he was not so sure anymore. Sora remembered his big brother's last words. He had said he promised to come back. Those words echoed in Sora's mind, but now they only brought pain. Sora held his head in both hands and thought in a small, shaky voice that they were never able to contact his brother again after that night. It was as if he had completely disappeared. The memory felt heavy. He remembered sitting with his parents in front of the television during the time when everything started to fall apart. Back then, the news reporters had tried to calm everyone down. They said everything would be fine if people just stayed inside their homes. Sora believed them at first. But then things got worse. His mother had shouted in shock that 20 towers had appeared all around the world. The number was terrifying. No one understood where they came from or what they were. These towers had suddenly risen, just like the one called Tower Advent. Sora thought to himself that after a while, even the news stopped reporting updates. The TV went silent. The radio only repeated the same messages again and again, like a machine stuck on a loop. Then one day, they heard shouting from the road outside their home. Someone was warning everyone to hurry and evacuate to the shelter. Sora and his family quickly packed what they could and prepared to leave. Sora remembered how his mother had written a letter to his brother before they left. She placed all her feelings into those words, hoping he would somehow see it one day. On their way to the shelter, Sora noticed many things around them. The world felt strange and broken. It was like everything around them was trying to send a warning, trying to say something was deeply wrong. They saw a group of soldiers passing by in a high-mobility military vehicle. Sora looked at their faces, and all he saw was despair. The soldiers looked exhausted and hopeless. The cars they rode in were covered in horrible scars, like they had been through battles. The metal was torn, and the windows were cracked. A terrible, rotten smell floated from the vehicles. It made Sora feel sick. He realized then that things were much worse than the news had ever told them. While Sora was deep in thought, his father looked around and asked in a confused voice what was happening to the world. No one had any answers. Things were falling apart too quickly. Soon after, their family reached a large gymnasium that had been turned into a temporary shelter. Sora looked around and saw that the shelter was completely packed with refugees. So many people had gathered there, but almost no one spoke. The silence felt heavy, like everyone was simply waiting to hear a final judgment. It felt as if they were all waiting for something terrible they couldn't stop. As Sora stood there, his eyes fell on an old man sitting quietly on the ground, looking weak and tired. Before he could keep thinking about it, his mother called out to him and told him to hurry. He nodded and stepped behind his parents, saying okay. But deep inside, his thoughts continued. Even in that heavy silence, there were always people who caused trouble. Some people just wanted to be noticed, to prove they still existed. Then, something happened right in front of him. A man suddenly grabbed a young boy by the arm and shouted at him angrily, accusing the boy of stealing his bread. The child, scared and trying to defend himself, shouted back that he had not stolen anything. He said everyone had been given one piece of bread and that the man had already eaten his share. But before the boy could finish speaking, the man struck him hard. The hit was loud and cruel. People all around the shelter started whispering in shock. One person said the man had hit the child. Another person urged someone to step in and stop it. But no one moved. Then the man bent down, still wearing a dark and twisted smile. He snatched a piece of bread from the boy's hand and leaned in close to the child's face. With a cruel smirk, he told the boy that now he was full, so it should be okay for the man to borrow the bread instead. It was clear the man did not care about fairness or kindness. He just wanted power, even if it meant bullying a child during a time of crisis. The young boy, with his face covered in sweat and pain, nodded slowly while clenching his teeth. Tears filled his eyes. The man in front of him looked pleased and spoke with a cruel kind of joy, saying that the bread now belonged to him until the boy died. He added that the child probably would not survive for more than a few days anyway. The boy could not hold it in anymore and began crying loudly, his voice echoing in the crowded shelter. At that moment, Sora's father stepped forward. He calmly but firmly placed a hand on the man's shoulder and asked him in a sharp voice what he was doing. The man turned his head and looked at him with a mocking smile. He told Sora's father not to worry about someone else's problems and called him a geezer. But Sora's father was not afraid. He raised his voice and demanded that the man return the bread to the child. The man grew angry and clenched his fist, clearly getting ready to throw a punch. But before he could strike, Sora's father moved first and punched him straight in the face. The man flew back and hit the ground hard, groaning in pain and frustration as he clenched his teeth. Without hesitation, Sora's father bent down, picked up the piece of bread, and handed it gently to the crying boy. He told him to take it. The boy, still sniffling, looked up at him with eyes full of gratitude and softly thanked him. Meanwhile, the man who had been knocked down slowly pushed himself off the floor. His face was twisted with rage as he shouted angrily. Sora's father stared at him with cold eyes as if giving a warning without saying a word. The man stood up, brushed off his clothes, and hissed a single word, telling him to remember this moment. It was a threat. Sora, watching everything, called out to his dad in confusion. His father glanced sideways, still keeping an eye on the man, and told Sora not to worry. He said he would keep watching that guy closely from now on. Even in a place meant for safety, danger could still hide in the hearts of people. Sora stared at the man who had hurt the boy earlier. He burned the man's face into his memory and swore he would never forget it, even if he died. The man's name was Kagawa Eiji. Sora remembered him from the past. He was the same person who used to enjoy bullying him. In Sora's eyes, he was nothing but trash. While Sora was lost in these dark thoughts, something unexpected happened. A soldier suddenly burst into the gym, looking panicked. He shouted loudly that there was an emergency and told everyone to evacuate immediately to the high-mobility vehicle behind the shelter. One of the men in the shelter, confused, adjusted his glasses and asked why they had to leave. The soldier looked serious and said it was confidential, and that he could not give them any more information. This only made the man angrier. He murmured in frustration and then shouted loudly, demanding answers. He reminded the soldier that they had been locked in the shelter for 2 days without any proper explanation. Now, they were being told to leave without a reason. He threw his bag on the floor in exhaustion and asked angrily why people even paid taxes if this was how they were treated. As the argument continued, a strange and chilling voice echoed through the shelter. Everyone turned their heads toward the sound with shock and wide eyes. It was something unnatural. The soldier, now clearly terrified, shouted again, telling everyone that they were coming and to run immediately. One of the civilians asked in confusion who they were, but there was no time for an answer. Sora did not wait. He turned to his parents and shouted for them to hurry. Inside, he had a terrible feeling growing in his chest. It felt like the world was about to collapse right in front of them. As they all began running toward another exit door, the first exit suddenly burst open. A crowd of strange and terrifying figures rushed into the gym. One of them stood out, a terrifying beast with huge fangs and glowing red eyes. Sora froze for a second, staring at it with wide, horrified eyes. He could not even believe what he was seeing. It was not human. He thought to himself in shock, trying to make sense of it. What the hell was that? As the monsters roared and charged through the exit door into the gym, chaos broke out all around. The people inside screamed in fear and panic. Some cried out desperately for help, shouting that monsters had entered. Sora's parents called out to him with urgency, yelling his name and telling him to hurry. But everything was moving too fast. People were running in every direction, bumping into each other, trying to escape the nightmare that had suddenly come to life. Fear was in everyone's eyes. Sora, frozen for a moment, looked around with wide eyes and shouted that he could not make it to the car now. He told his parents to go ahead without him. Inside the evacuation car, people were shouting angrily. They were scared and wanted the doors closed immediately. Sora's father grabbed Sora's hand tightly and refused to let him go. He called out his son's name with all his heart, not wanting to leave him behind. But the people inside the car didn't care. They yelled that the car was already full. One man even shouted that they didn't want to be dragged into someone else's problem. Another person slammed his hand onto Sora's father's back and told him that if he was going to hesitate, then he should get off the car completely. Sora could feel the pressure. His father did not want to let go, But Sora knew they did not have time. With his teeth clenched in determination, he broke free from his father's grip and ran toward another car. His father called out behind him, but Sora did not stop. He shouted back that he would get into another vehicle. But when he reached the second car, a man standing near it told him coldly that it was also full. Sora stood there, surrounded by confusion, noise, and monsters closing in, with no place left to run to. The world around him was crumbling, and all he could do was try to survive. As Sora ran through the chaos, he passed another car but quickly realized it was full too. He felt panic rise in his chest. Then he saw one last car. He thought to himself that this was his final chance. He ran toward it, hoping to escape. He tried to clear his way and get in, but he struggled and could not do it on his own. Just when things felt hopeless, a man suddenly reached out his hand to help him. Grateful, Sora grabbed it and pulled himself up into the car. He quickly thanked the man with relief. But then Sora looked up and froze. The man who helped him was Eiji Kagawa, Eiji, the one who used to bully him. Eiji gave him an evil smile and repeated Sora's words with a mocking tone. He said that thank you was actually his line. Sora's eyes widened in shock. He could not believe it had to be him. Then, without warning, Eiji let go of Sora's hand. Sora fell backward from the car and hit the ground hard. As he lay there in pain, he heard Eiji laugh and tell him to die in his father's place, calling him trash. Sora hit the ground, his body shaking. His teeth clenched as he tried to hold himself together. People ran all around him, rushing for safety, not even noticing him. Sora closed his body tightly and thought in despair that he did not want to die. In his heart, he cried for someone to help him. In that moment of fear and pain, an image flashed in his mind, the man with glowing red eyes from his dream. Sora suddenly remembered that strange dream. He thought of the words the man had said at the end of the dream. He had said, at the end of the abyss, "I'll be waiting for you." That voice echoed in his memory. Then everything became silent. Sora slowly opened his eyes wide. He looked around with confusion. He whispered to himself, wondering was that a dream? And where was he now? As Sora was lost in thought, something suddenly came at him from the side. A goblin had attacked him. Sora quickly dodged with a surprised smile on his face, though fear was already creeping in. He thought to himself with confusion monsters were chasing him, but where were his mom and dad? Why was he alone in this place? Was this hell? Had he died? He kept running as fast as he could. But the goblin was not giving up. It threw its weapon at him, and the sharp object struck him. Sora felt pain shoot through his side and cried out in his thoughts that it hurt. He turned his head quickly, looking around, and asked himself why the monsters were only chasing him. The goblin rushed toward him again with wild speed. Sora's heart pounded. He turned and ran forward again, fists clenched in fear. He could not understand anything that was happening. He thought about the huge tower that had suddenly risen from the ground earlier. It had changed everything. Then he remembered Eiji, the man who had bullied him in the shelter and pushed him out of the evacuation car. Anger filled his chest. And then his thoughts turned toward the mysterious man from his dream, the one who had spoken about the abyss. Now, real monsters were coming after him, with no escape in sight. Sora gritted his teeth and cursed his situation. He could not believe how everything had changed in an instant. He clenched his fist tighter and shouted with anger as he grabbed a stone from the ground. With his body trembling and rage taking over, he turned toward the goblin and screamed that they should all die. He threw himself forward with all the strength he had left, holding the stone in his hand, ready to fight. Sora slammed the stone down hard on the goblin's head. The monster fell to the ground with a loud thud, and blood quickly spread around its body. Sora dropped to his knees beside the dead creature, breathing heavily and shaking. He thought with relief that he had survived. As he stared closely at the goblin's lifeless form, he noticed something strange. It looked like a monster from a video game. Then he saw something else. There were strange black marks on the goblin's chest, and he wondered if they were runes. Suddenly, something very strange happened. Sora gasped in shock as he saw a glowing black stone slowly rise from the goblin's chest and float in the air. His eyes widened as he watched it. He asked himself what it was. Then, without warning, the black stone shot forward like a bullet and embedded itself into his body. He cried out and clenched his teeth as pain hit him. But something was changing. Sora noticed that the wound he had received earlier was healing quickly. He was stunned. Not only was the pain fading, but he felt different, stronger, faster. He looked at his hands and thought with disbelief that his body had become more powerful. He wondered if defeating enemies could make him stronger, just like in video games. He stood up, still breathing hard, and picked up the goblin's weapon. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. As he turned away from the body, he thought to himself that there might be more monsters hiding on this small island. He needed to stay alert. He decided to check the area carefully to avoid another surprise attack. After some time passed, Sora carefully looked around the floating island again. He thought to himself that he had already walked around the whole area once, and there were no more monsters nearby. Then, his eyes landed on a door. It was broken and made of stone. He wondered if that door was the only way to leave the island. He walked toward the edge of the island and looked around. All he could see was smoke floating thick in the sky. It gave everything a strange and mysterious feeling. Then he noticed something unusual: stairs made of floating stone, hanging in the air. His eyes widened with surprise and worry. He thought the stairs looked dangerous and risky. Sora began walking on the floating stairs, one careful step at a time. He held the goblin's weapon tightly and moved forward. As he climbed, he thought that it felt like the kind of place where monsters might hide in a video game. But unlike a game, he reminded himself that if he fell, he would not respawn. He admitted to himself that he did not have the courage to test if this was just a dream or an actual game world. Finally, after walking a long distance on the dangerous path, Sora reached the end of the stairs. A door stood in front of him, and he felt relief. He told himself that he had made it. These strange stairs had led him here. He stepped through the cave, still gripping weapon tightly in case of danger. As he entered, he noticed a wooden candle burning softly in front of him. The small flame flickered in the darkness, and he stared at it with confusion. He had no idea why a candle would be burning in such a strange and empty place. Sora stepped through a mysterious door and found himself standing inside a dark cave. There was a wooden candle flickering nearby, giving off a faint glow. As he stood near it, his eyes were drawn to a large stone with strange characters carved into its surface. He placed his hand on the stone, and although he had never seen such writing before, the meaning of the message suddenly entered his mind like a whisper. The stone said that the fragment belonged to the inscriber, and that if someone could gather all the fragments, they would be allowed to leave the abyss. Sora stood there with a confused look on his face, wondering if this strange place was truly the abyss everyone spoke of. But as the realization sank in, he smiled with determination. He believed that if he could collect all the fragments, then he would be able to escape this dark place. That thought gave him a new sense of purpose. He became excited and full of energy. Sora then placed both his hands on the large stone door ahead of him and pushed with all his strength, trying to open it. While doing so, he remembered the monster he had fought earlier and told himself that it actually was not that strong. He began to believe that if he stayed calm and focused, he could make it out of the abyss alive. With enough pressure, the door slowly began to open from both sides. As he walked through, he noticed how the abyss was built like a tower, with different floors. He remembered that the first floor had been about 900 square meters in size, and the monster he faced there had the number 1 engraved on its body. The second floor, where he was now, was almost double that size, around 1800 square meters, and the monster here had the number 2 engraved on it. This made Sora realize that each floor was larger and more difficult, and each monster stronger than the last. On the third floor of the abyss, Sora noticed that the space had grown even larger, about 3,600 square meters. This time, there were 4 monsters, but only one of them had the number 3 engraved on its body. That was how he discovered something important. The special monsters with numbers carved into them were the only ones that carried the fragments. These fragments were the key needed to move on to the next level. He realized that as he climbed higher through the abyss, the floor sizes kept doubling, the number of monsters kept increasing, and the strength of those monsters grew much greater. This made his journey more dangerous with each step forward. As Sora opened the next door and looked out at the floor ahead, he stood among the dead bodies of monsters he had already defeated. He thought about how much harder it was getting to find the monsters with the number keys. The space was larger, and with twice the number of creatures to search through, it took more time and energy to track down the right one. But even with these challenges, Sora felt a change within himself. He felt energy flowing through his body, like something inside him was waking up. He realized he was getting stronger too, slowly but surely. Each battle pushed him to grow, and he kept pushing forward. He slammed his weapon onto the ground, causing dust to rise into the air around him. As he stood in the middle of that battlefield, he remembered how the higher he climbed, the more monsters appeared. But now he had become powerful. He even fought and defeated the same monster that had once attacked the shelter on the 12th floor, a monster that had been feared by many. This time, that beast had been no match for him. He had defeated it easily. Now, every time he dyed the ground red with the blood of monsters, he noticed something else. With every kill, his emotions became more distant and numb. The more monsters he fought, the less he felt. As Sora moved forward through the endless floors of the abyss, a glowing screen appeared in the air and floated beside him, showing messages that updated as he advanced and defeated monsters. Each message gave him shocking numbers. It said, "Notification, 13th floor, 4,096 monsters." Then, "Notification, 14th floor, 16,384 monsters." Later, it showed, "Notification, 21st floor, 1,048,576 monsters." With every new floor, the number of monsters increased at an extreme rate, and Sora realized just how deep and dangerous this abyss really was. By the time he reached the 30th floor, he was surrounded by more than 500 million monsters. At that point, finding the monster with the key fragment felt almost impossible. He compared it in his mind to searching for a contact lens in the middle of a desert, hopeless and endless. Some of the key monsters were protected by large groups of other monsters. Others hid deep inside dark caves. And the most frustrating ones of all were the ones that only appeared after he had killed every single monster on the entire floor. It tested his patience, his strength, and his will to keep going. As he stepped carefully through another massive floor, he finally reached one of the key monsters. It was a powerful beast, and it suddenly slammed its giant weapon toward him. But Sora reacted quickly. He dodged the attack and swung his own weapon with full force. His blow landed directly on the monster's head, and it was so strong that the monster's head flew off its body. Blood splashed around him as the huge body collapsed to the ground. In that moment, he thought to himself that no matter how many times he had to fight, no matter how difficult it became, he would keep moving forward. With that thought burning in his heart, he opened another door and stepped onto the 42nd floor of the abyss. The glowing screen returned again and displayed something truly unbelievable. The number of monsters on this floor was over 2 trillion, exactly 2,199,223,255,552. Sora stood there as a wave of monsters rushed toward him. Instead of fear, he felt excitement rising in his chest. As they charged at him, he laughed and shouted in a cheerful voice that this was great. A huge dragon-like monster flew across the sky, its wings spreading wide above the dark land. Sora looked up at it and thought to himself how many years might have passed since he first entered this place. But in truth, time had lost all meaning for him. He could no longer tell if days or years had passed. In the abyss, only two things remained: death and killing. That was the only life he now understood. Meanwhile, Sora sat silently near a wall, slowly scratching it with his finger, lost in his thoughts. The rough surface of the wall was marked with his carvings, likely reminders of the monsters he had fought or the fragments he had collected. Suddenly, he heard loud sounds, the growls and footsteps of monsters approaching. He turned his eyes toward them and saw a swarm of beasts rushing toward him. But Sora didn't panic. The moment they came close, he stood up, swung his weapon with great power, and killed them all with smooth, practiced movements. As he landed back on the ground, surrounded by dead bodies, he thought to himself that this had become his entire world: monsters dying and him killing them. He bent down and picked up the head of one of the fallen monsters. Holding it in his hands, he murmured to himself, wondering what number this one had. It had become a routine, checking each body to see if it was the key. Then he slowly walked back toward the same wall he had been carving earlier. Looking closely at the scratches he had made, he said quietly that it should be around here. He began carving again and said to himself that it was about time he found the key. His words were calm but carried the weight of endless searching and fighting. The scene then shifted to a powerful moment. Sora now stood face to face with a massive monster, one unlike any he had fought before. It looked strong, dangerous, and different from the others. They both stood still for a moment, ready to fight. Sora held his weapon tightly in both hands, his eyes fixed on the beast. He looked at the creature and spoke with calm but serious strength. He told it that it looked flashy and asked if it was the key. As the intense battle continued, the large monster in front of Sora suddenly moved one of its sharp, nail-like legs toward him, aiming to strike him down. But Sora was fast and experienced. He quickly dodged the attack just before the monster's legs slammed into the ground with great force, shaking the earth beneath them. The ground cracked slightly from the impact. Without wasting a second, Sora rushed forward and attacked the monster. While doing so, he thought to himself that no matter how strong these creatures seemed, it always ended the same way. He swung his weapon with deadly precision, and it struck the monster with great power. The creature was killed in a single blow, and its body broke apart into many pieces, which scattered across the ground. Sora stood tall on top of a pile of stones and monster remains, his expression calm but full of tiredness. As he looked down at the broken parts of the monster, he thought that all these beasts, who believed they were stronger than him, always died with just one strike. He told himself that power meant nothing to him anymore. It no longer impressed him. He then clenched his fist tightly, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion build up inside him. He quietly murmured to himself, asking where the key was. Then, unable to hold back his frustration any longer, he shouted into the empty space, demanding the key to the 42nd floor to come out. He yelled that he was sick of this endless search and tired of the same cycle repeating again and again. His voice echoed across the battlefield. As he stood there, many monsters began flying high in the sky, their wings stirring the air. Dust particles rose from the ground, making the atmosphere cloudy and blurry. The entire scene looked like a battlefield from a dream. In the year 20XX, something terrifying happened all over the world. 20 giant towers suddenly appeared across the globe. No one understood what they were or where they came from. Humanity could not react in time. The towers became the homes of terrifying monsters, and those monsters rushed out and began destroying everything. Cities were crushed, people were killed, and most of mankind was wiped out. This horrible day was later called Judgment Day. But not everything was lost. Some of the people who survived Judgment Day went through a strange change. They awakened and became connected to something called the system. It was like a mysterious power that gave them strength. A glowing message would appear on a screen for each new awakened person. When one boy faced a monster, a message popped up in front of him, saying notification was awakening successful. Initializing combat power. These awakened people were suddenly gifted with amazing strength, speed, and special abilities through the system. With this power, order slowly returned to the world. The awakened survivors formed groups called hunter guilds. These guilds hunted the monsters, protected the people, and rebuilt some of the broken world. Hope returned, but the dangers of the towers never truly ended. In another part of the scene, Sora was chasing a wolf-like monster across the ground. He shouted for the monster to wait and demanded to see its stats, as if he was trying to figure out its power level. He then caught the monster using a long chain, pulling it back forcefully. But the monster struggled hard, trying to break free. Then, out of nowhere, a voice called out, warning Sora that the monster was using an advanced transfer scroll, a rare item that allowed monsters or people to teleport. The voice told him not to let the monster finish the spell. Sora was shocked. As he listened, he murmured to himself, confused, asking if that voice had spoken human language. He did not expect a monster to sound like a person. As he looked up, something even stranger happened. The monster's body began to rise into the air. A bright line of energy appeared between the sky and the ground, twirling like magic, and the monster started floating up through that beam. Sora watched with wide eyes and thought there was no way this could be happening. He was completely shocked. In front of him, above the swirling beam of light, there seemed to be something unbelievable, an exit. But deep inside, he hoped it was true. With determination in his eyes, he bent his knees and prepared himself. Then, with all the strength he had, he jumped high into the air, aiming straight toward the circle of energy that had formed in the sky. As he flew upward, a glowing red message suddenly appeared in front of him. It said, "Warning, Abyssal Summon cannot transfer more than 2 beings." But Sora did not stop. More and more screens floated around him, trying to block his way. He gritted his teeth and thought with burning anger that no one would stop him. He shouted silently in his heart and pushed himself forward through the beam with full force. At the same time, far from the abyss, in a place near Earth's city, the scene changed. Many monsters were flying through the sky, filling the air with chaos and fear. There was a young woman with red hair. Her name was Yusanazaki, and she was a level 19 awakened. She ran as fast as she could, her heels clicking loudly against the ground, while fear filled her heart. She thought to herself that she could not let the monsters keep chasing her. But her escape did not go as planned. Suddenly, her foot got caught in a thick rope-like bush, and she tripped forward, falling hard to the ground. She looked with wide, frightened eyes and realized she was in danger. She muttered to herself that this situation was really bad. Then, a deep voice reached her. Standing in front of her were two people. One was a large, muscular man carrying a massive weapon on his shoulder. The other was a woman, standing calmly beside him. The man was Shousai Toshida, a level 38 awakened known as a barbarian. He looked down at you with no mercy and said with force, telling her to hand over the advanced transfer scroll. As the tension grew in the forest clearing, another man stepped forward in front of Yusanazaki. He looked serious and spoke with a strong voice, saying that a level 60 scroll was too powerful for a level 15 beginner like her. His name was Chuji Shidu, a level 35 swordsman, and he stood confidently with a smirk on his face. He warned you that if she did not hand over the scroll, he would not hold back. Another person in their group, a woman named Aika, who was a level 34 druid, turned her head and gave a cold warning. She said there should be no killing. Still lying on the ground, you shouted in panic with her eyes wide open. She reminded them that hunters attacking each other was strictly against the rules. It was forbidden. But Shousai, the large man with the giant weapon, just smiled cruelly. He slammed his sword into the dirt right next to her face, so close that the soil sprayed onto her. With a proud voice, he told her that he was the rules around here. Yu's expression turned to shock. She could not believe how far they were willing to go just for the scroll. Then Shousai raised his voice again. He told her that if she gave him the scroll peacefully, he would at least leave her bones unbroken. But Yu was not ready to give up. She sat up quickly while holding the scroll tightly, and shouted that they really did not want to push her any further. Aika, watching with sharp and serious eyes, realized something terrible was about to happen. She shouted that Yu was trying to use a forced summon and begged the others to stop her. Shousai became furious. His teeth clenched in anger, and he rushed toward her with his sword raised, screaming for her to give him the scroll. He brought his weapon down hard, but it was too late. Yu had already started the summoning. Bright energy began to twist and spin around her hand. A powerful magic circle opened, glowing with sharp light. Shousai's eyes opened wide in shock as he realized it was not a normal skill, it was a teleportation circle. Then, with fire in her eyes and energy swirling around her, Yu shouted that if she was going to die, she was going to take him with her. The magic lit up the entire area as her body and the scroll responded to the summoning. Shousai stood still for a moment, his voice low and full of shock as he whispered the words forced summon. He could not believe what Yusanazaki had just done. Aika, standing nearby with wide, panicked eyes, yelled that an advanced monster summoned by force could not be controlled. She warned that this was the end, and begged the others to stop Yu before it was too late. But there was no more time left. Chuji rushed toward Yu, planning to attack her and stop the summon, but Yu's eyes were glowing with fierce energy. She shouted with pure anger, telling him to die. Suddenly, a large glowing circle formed in the air and connected directly to her hand. A powerful beam of light shot out from the circle, blasting Chuji backwards through the air. He crashed into the ground with great force. Shousai turned to Aika and spoke with worry. He said that the energy he just felt was dangerous. This situation was really bad. Then, all at once, the teleportation was completed. A wave of bursting energy exploded in the area. Chuji shouted that it had shown up. And there, in the middle of the circle, where Yusanazaki once stood, a monster had now appeared. It had the shape of a huge wolf. It was a Cerberus, and it was level 3. Chuji did not take it seriously. He looked at the monster and laughed, speaking in a mocking tone. He said it was just a level 3 Cerberus and act careless. One of the men from the group looked at the Cerberus monster and laughed. He picked up a bone and tossed it toward the creature like it was just a playful dog. He joked and said the monster looked cute and harmless, not fierce at all like he had expected. Chuji also made fun of the situation. He teased Yusanazaki, saying that this weak monster was what she had risked her life to protect. He called it a joke and laughed at her choice. Yusanazaki sat on the ground, feeling disappointed and confused. She looked at the Cerberus and softly asked herself why this had happened. She couldn't understand how everything had gone so wrong. But suddenly, something terrifying and unexpected happened. Without warning, the Cerberus shattered into bloody pieces, its body torn apart. Blood splashed across the ground. Everyone froze. Behind the spot where the monster had just stood, a man stepped forward from the smoke and blood. It was Sora. His presence was filled with powerful energy. He walked calmly toward Usanazaki, who was still sitting on the ground in shock. She stared at him, trying to speak, her voice shaking. She began to say something but could not finish her sentence. Shaosai looked at the figure in disbelief. He asked what the hell just happened. Chuji was confused and asked if this was a humanoid monster. They had never seen someone like Sora before, someone who appeared out of a summon instead of a beast. Sora slowly turned his head toward them. His face looked calm but serious. He simply said, "I am free." Then he suddenly shouted with joy, lifting his arms into the air. He smiled wide, his face full of happiness, and looked up at the sky. He declared with excitement that he had finally escaped that place, the abyss. The scene began with Shaosai feeling frozen in place, shocked just from hearing a terrifying laugh. Aika stood beside him, eyes wide in fear as she covered her face, trying to endure a powerful gust of wind. She cried out, overwhelmed by the pressure, asking who could possibly be causing such a force. Through the chaos, they saw a figure standing calmly before them. It was Sora. Aika looked at him with a mix of confusion and disbelief. Suddenly, Sora stepped forward and grabbed Aika by both shoulders, his voice desperate as he asked if this was really Earth. Aika, her voice shaking, confirmed that it was. Upon hearing her answer, Sora felt an immense relief wash over him. With a joyful expression, he exclaimed that he had finally made it back. Then, noticing their strange outfits, he asked if they were doing some kind of cosplay. His question clearly irritated Chuji and Shaosai, who glanced at each other with frustration. Before anyone could respond, Sora warned them not to mock the Koshu Guild Tiger's roar, calling them punks. As he spoke, Shaosai and Chuji charged at him, swinging their swords with full force. But even as their blades made contact, they did no damage. Sora stood completely unhurt. His eyes lit up with a glowing rage as he turned toward them. Shaosai stepped back, horrified, and muttered that Sora was a monster. The word repeated in Sora's mind, monster. It echoed with confusion and disbelief. Then, suddenly, he grabbed Shaosai by the neck. Shaosai struggled in pain, unable to break free, as his reflection appeared in Sora's intense gaze. The atmosphere grew heavier as energy started swirling violently around Sora. His eyes glowed with intensity, and he shouted at Shaosai to show him his number. Shaosai, still caught in Sora's strong grip and gasping for breath, murmured in confusion. He had no idea what Sora was talking about and struggled to free himself by grabbing Sora's hand. The word number did not make any sense to him. Sora looked confused as well, unsure why Shaosai had no idea what he meant. Then, almost as if realizing something, Sora suddenly let go of Shaosai's neck. Shaosai fell backward, dropping to his knees and coughing as he tried to recover. His voice trembled with frustration as he cursed the situation, wondering how it was possible even with his strong body, he had been overpowered so easily. Chuji, still shocked by what had happened, called out to Shaosai, addressing him as boss. But Sora coldly told them both to get lost. As Shaosai and Chuji started walking away, Shaosai turned his head with a glare full of hatred and anger, shouting that Sora would regret this. After they left, only Sora and Usanazaki remained in the area. Yu stood still, staring at Sora's back with a mixture of fear and awe. She noticed the raw strength he carried and the terrifying scars that marked his body. Her eyes widened as her thoughts raced. She wondered if Sora could be some kind of demon summoned from the abyss using a transfer scroll. The way he had appeared, his overwhelming power, and the strange energy around him, it was all too strange to be human. As she was deep in thought, Sora turned his head and asked how many years it had been since the tower appeared. Yu blinked for a moment, then replied that it had been 5 years. Sora stood silently for a moment, filled with countless questions running through his mind. Was this really Earth? Why did he need to ask something so basic? Then more thoughts came that what was the story behind that transfer scroll, her strange outfit, and everything he had just experienced? None of it made sense to him, and the confusion in his heart only grew stronger. Usanazaki explaining to Sora what had happened since the tower appeared. She told him that after the tower showed up, a strange system awakened inside humans, giving them powers and abilities they never had before. As she spoke, a glowing screen floated in the air, showing a grim message. Since the tower's arrival 5 years ago, 1/3 of the cities had already fallen. The world was no longer the same. You began to say more, but Sora quickly interrupted her. His voice was sharp and filled with disbelief as he asked if the outside world had truly changed that much during the 5 years he was trapped in the abyss. You nodded and gave him more terrible news that S City had just gone through its 7th major invasion, and she had barely escaped with her life. Hearing the name of the city made Sora's heart pound. His eyes widened in shock because S City was where he used to live. Panic and urgency rushed through him. He grabbed you by the shoulders and asked desperately about Imai City, wanting to know what was happening there now. She looked at him with sadness and told him that Imai City was already in ruins. However, she added that strong fighters had gone there, and she believed they might be able to hold off the monsters for now. Sora's expression became serious as he demanded to know how to reach S City from their current location. You pointed in one direction and began to explain, but before she could even finish, Sora had already started running toward it. He did not waste a second. You stood frozen in shock. She watched him move quickly with powerful steps, heading off alone. Her thoughts spun with alarm and curiosity. A mysterious figure with such strength and strange power had appeared out of nowhere. She realized this was something far bigger than she had expected. Determined, she told herself that she had to inform Lady Wani-sama immediately. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Xiaosai and his group walking slowly along a road. Xiaosai was badly injured and needed help to move, so he leaned on Chuji and another man, placing his arms over their shoulders for support. He was still full of anger and frustration from their encounter with Sora. As they walked, Xiaosai gritted his teeth and muttered that Sora was a fool, clearly still shaken and humiliated by what had happened. Suddenly, the air around them changed. A powerful presence appeared without warning. A mysterious figure floated, wrapped in a long piece of cloth that swirled in the wind. Dark energy twisted around his body, making him look dangerous and unnatural. His face was hidden, but his voice was loud and angry as he demanded to know who Sora was. He shouted at them, saying he could sense Sora's presence on them and gave them only 3 seconds to tell him where Sora had gone. The group stood frozen, shocked by the sudden appearance of this threatening figure. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, Xiaosai, still burning with pride and rage, snapped back. He shouted that the figure was full of lies, refusing to give any information. The figure did not wait any longer. He suddenly landed on the ground with force and swung his weapon without mercy. In just moments, everything turned dark. A system screen appeared in the air, showing the horrible outcome that Aika, level 34 druid, her status was deceased. Chuji Shidu, level 35 swordsman, his status was deceased. Xiaosai Tashida, level 38 barbarian, his status was deceased. The scene changed to a bright and shiny day at the headquarters of the Tower Frontline Guild known as Tiger's Roar. Inside one of the rooms, a girl with black hair stood in front of her boss. Her expression was filled with sadness as she delivered terrible news. She said that all 4 life signals from Master Danashida's party had disappeared. Not only that, but they had also lost contact with Yusanazaki and the transfer scrolls she was carrying. Just then, a hand holding a wine glass appeared, and a deep voice responded with frustration, calling the team useless trash. The man, clearly angry and disappointed, asked if the people she had personally recommended could not even defeat a level 10 summoner. The girl's voice trembled as she tried to explain that all their life signals vanished at the same moment. In other words, they were all killed instantly. The man looked confused at first, then realized what that meant: they were taken out in a single strike. He was Mukai Licht, a level 118 Storm Priest. He was clearly a powerful and important figure. As he turned his head toward the girl, he gave a direct order to find out who was responsible for wiping out the team. She nodded quickly and replied with a respect. But Mukai Licht was not done yet. He stood up from his chair and gave another command, saying that no matter what, they had to capture Yusanazaki and make her explain everything to that person. Again, the girl obeyed with a firm response. Mukai Licht walked toward a large glass window, put his hands in his pockets, and looked out over the city. His voice was calm but deadly as he declared that anyone who dared to harm his subordinates would be killed. Just as he spoke those chilling words, something flashed past the window with incredible speed. Mukai's eyes followed the blur. It was Sora. moving so fast he was nearly invisible. Mukai sensed something strange in the air, a strong and overwhelming smell of blood. Confused and alert, he murmured to himself, wondering who it could be. He realized the direction the presence was heading in was toward a fallen zone, one of the most dangerous areas. His thoughts grew more serious. He could feel that this invasion was different from all the others. A powerful force was moving, something far more dangerous than anything they had seen in the past 5 years. He believed the tower, which had been silent for so long, was finally waking up. Realizing how serious the situation had become, Mukai turned quickly and gave an urgent order to all search squads. He told them to fall back immediately because they were now facing a full-blown crisis. At the same time, outside, Sora jumped high into the sky with incredible power, began to move forward. Around him, small dragons flew across the sky. The scene changed again, this time to the S-City Fallen Zone, a place full of ruin and danger. Sora sat quietly on a rooftop, looking down at the destroyed city. His heart was heavy. He thought about how everything had changed during the 5 years he was trapped in the abyss. The once lively city had become a place of death and horror. But he also thought about himself. In those 5 long years he had changed too. He had grown stronger, forced to survive in a nightmare world. He remembered the pain and darkness of the abyss, how he had nearly lost his humanity. He used to be a coward, someone who feared monsters and danger. But the struggle in the abyss had sharpened him. He remembered the moments when he had to eat raw meat to survive, blood dripping down his face, and his eyes glowing red like a beast. He had come close to becoming something less than human. But even in that darkness, there was one thing that kept him from losing himself completely: the memory of his family. With tears in his eyes, he thought about them. Those thoughts gave him the strength to hold on. Just then, a small flying monster appeared near him. Without any fear or hesitation, Sora killed it with a single hit. He looked at it, and thought that the monsters which once terrified him were now nothing more than weak creatures. He had truly become something stronger. He stood up, began to run forward with full determination, and thought with a pounding heart, "Dad, Mom, brother, please be safe." Sora finally reaching S-City. He looked around in silence, filled with deep thoughts. Once, this city had been full of life, a busy and happy place. But now, it was completely ruined. Buildings were broken down and cracked, as if a giant earthquake had hit everything. As he climbed the stairs of a building, he noticed something strange. Even though the city was damaged, there were no signs of monsters killing people recently. It was clear to him that since the evacuation, no one had been living there anymore. Sora reached the door of an old apartment and opened it. But before he could unlock it, the weak door broke down and crashed to the floor. He stepped inside slowly, his eyes scanning the familiar but broken room. The walls were cracked, the air was quiet, and everything seemed frozen in time. He spoke to himself in a low, emotional voice. He said he was home. Even though he knew no one would be waiting there, he had still come. This apartment was filled with his happiest memories, and he just wanted to feel close to them again. As he walked further inside, something on the table caught his attention. It was a small piece of paper. He turned toward it with confusion, not expecting to find anything. When he read the words written on it, his heart trembled. It was a message left for him, clearly written by someone in his family. The note said that everyone else believed he was dead, but his mother and another family member never gave up hope. They had returned to this destroyed place, brought back all his old things, and set up the room just like before. The message said they were waiting for him. Sora softly murmured to himself, realizing how much love his family had for him. Even when it was dangerous, they had risked everything to come back to this ruined place just to show that they still believed in him. Tears welled up in his eyes. Sora continued to look through the apartment where he had once lived with his family. He opened the cupboard and saw it was full of clothes. The letter said they had left his favorite clothes for him, in every size from small to mustard, just in case he returned at any time and needed something to wear. Inside a drawer, just like the letter said, he found a map. The note explained that it led to the 6th shelter. His parents had written that if he ever read this letter, he should come find them there. They said they would be waiting for him. The letter was signed with love from his dad and mom. Sora picked up a photo of his family. The old picture showed happier times, and as he held it close to his chest, tears started falling from his eyes. As he wiped his tears, he picked up a knife of steel and caught a reflection of his eyes on it. He stared into his own eyes and began to think seriously. He wondered just how strong he had become. Had he grown powerful enough to put an end to all the chaos in this broken world? Could he really fix this post-apocalyptic mess? He stood in front of the mirror. Now dressed properly, he started cutting his long, messy hair using the same blade. As he watched his reflection change into someone cleaner and sharper, he thought that maybe, just maybe, he could get back everything he had lost. His eyes were sharp with new determination as he looked at the map again. He told himself it was time to head east, exactly where the map pointed the direction of the sixth shelter. After some time, he arrived at a road that was completely blocked. Broken buildings had collapsed and fallen onto the path, creating a massive wall of rubble. He looked at it with frustration. The main road was no longer usable. But instead of giving up, he told himself that going straight ahead would still be faster. He was determined. Nothing would stop him from reaching his family now. Sora moved with incredible speed through the ruined city. He jumped high into the air, leaping from rooftop to rooftop like a blur. His movements were so fast and smooth that it felt like a strong wind passed each time he soared by. Meanwhile, on the rooftop of one building, two boys stood on guard duty. One of them took a sip from his drink and then suddenly stopped, looking confused. He asked if the other had heard that huge noise. His friend, not taking it seriously, laughed and said he was probably just imagining things from drinking too much. He complained that standing guard was the most boring job ever. But in the very next moment, something shot past them like a powerful gust of wind. The first boy's eyes widened as he pointed in the direction it had gone. He shouted in shock, asking what the hell that was. The second boy looked stunned and admitted he could not even see what it was. Just then, another boy ran up to them, breathing heavily while holding his phone. He said he had caught something on camera and asked if they had seen it too. When they looked at the screen, they saw an image of someone flying through the air. They realized it was a person, mid-jump, moving faster than they thought possible. In another part of the city, the scene changed to a dangerous road. A young girl sat on the ground, clearly terrified. Her eyes were wide with fear as she shouted at someone off-screen to stay back. She begged for mercy, saying she was only there to find food. Standing in front of her were three boys. One of them looked down at her and commented with surprise that there were still survivors in the no-man's zone. Another boy made a rude comment about her appearance, showing that their intentions were not good. One of the boys standing in front of her looked with greedy excitement, and said it had been a long time since they had seen a woman. Trying to act kind, he smiled and told her not to worry, claiming they were not bad guys. But his words did not match his actions. He stepped closer to the frightened girl and said they would take good care of her. The girl, with fear in her eyes, shook her head and said no. Ignoring her, the boy sat down beside her on the ground. He placed his hand on her shoulder and tried to calm her by saying she did not need to be scared. His tone became disgusting as he said it would be a waste not to use her body. The girl was terrified. She closed her eyes tightly and began crying, unable to move. At that exact moment, Sora arrived. He slammed his foot on the ground so hard that dust and debris floated into the air around him. His voice was full of anger as he looked at the scene and called them trash. He said it with frustration, knowing that even after all this time, people like this still existed. He called them scum. Hearing his voice, the boy turned around and shouted with irritation, asking who was there. He warned Sora not to get in his way or he would regret it. Then he ordered the two other boys behind him to attack. The two rushed towards Sora with their weapons raised, shouting at him. But they were no match for Sora's power. As one of them reached him, Sora slapped him with such strength that blood flew out of the boy's mouth. He collapsed instantly to the ground. The second boy tried to strike Sora, but Sora caught his arm easily. The boy looked shocked, unable to believe someone could stop him like that. In one smooth motion, Sora raised his knee and smashed it into the boy's face. The second boy also fell back, defeated and in pain. The boy who had tried to hurt the girl stood up from the ground, full of pride and fear. He unsheathed his sword and shouted with anger that he was part of the guild tiger's roar. He warned Sora not to lay a hand on him, saying the guild wouldn't stay silent if he was harmed. But while he shouted, the frightened girl took the chance to run away from there. Sora stood still, recognizing the boy. He murmured the boy's name, Eiji Kagawa. Then Sora asked him with calm rage if he did not even remember the face of the person he had once killed. He ran his hand through his hair while looking at Eiji with cold eyes. Eiji's expression changed quickly from anger to fear. His eyes widened in shock, and he stuttered in disbelief. He asked if Sora was Makujima. Then he shouted that it was impossible. As Sora stepped closer, Eiji panicked and yelled for him to stay away. He demanded to know why Sora was still alive. But Sora did not stop. He moved forward and grabbed Eiji tightly by the neck. Tears filled Eiji's eyes as the fear took over him completely. Sora's voice was full of rage and pain as he said he had clawed his way back from hell, and it was all thanks to what Eiji had done. Now, he told Eiji that it was his turn to fall into hell. Then Sora pressed his sharp nails into Eiji's neck, causing blood to flow as Eiji screamed in pain. Sora stared at him with burning eyes and dark thoughts. He promised to take away every last bit of Eiji's pride, showing how strong he had become. Inside Sora's mind, a mysterious voice praised him, telling him to kill. The voice encouraged him, saying he was the strongest and that everything would go just as he wanted. Sora finally confronted Eiji Kagawa, the person who had bullied him for years. As he held Eiji tightly by the neck, old memories rushed through his mind. He remembered the pain, the humiliation, and how powerless he used to feel whenever Eiji tormented him. He recalled the moment from the past when Eiji had once grabbed him by the throat and mocked him with a cruel smile, saying he bullied Sora because it felt good to crush someone so weak. Fueled by these painful memories, Sora's anger boiled over, and he gripped Eiji's neck tighter, declaring that now was the time he would pay everything back. Eiji's eyes widened in fear as he struggled to breathe under Sora's grip. But then, a flicker of conscience passed through Sora's mind. He suddenly let go of Eiji's neck, causing him to fall to the ground, gasping and coughing while clutching his throat. Sora stared at him, realizing something troubling. He was starting to act just like Eiji had acted in the past. He thought to himself that if he let someone like Eiji go free, others might suffer like he did. He did not want revenge to make him into the same kind of person. So, instead of killing Eiji, Sora made a clear decision. He told Eiji that even though Eiji had tried to kill him by pushing him in front of a truck, he would not kill him in return. However, he could not simply forgive him either. Eiji looked up in shock and asked what Sora was planning to do. Sora stood firmly and remembered all the unfair things he had suffered during those 2 years of being bullied. He then told Eiji that he would deliver 1 punch for every wrong done. 1 punch for bullying the weak. Another punch for trying to take his life. He said that if Eiji could withstand 4 punches, they would be even. As Sora stood in front of Eiji, ready to deliver justice through his fists, Eiji panicked and broke down. He admitted that he had been wrong and that everything was his fault. In fear, he begged Sora for forgiveness, saying that if he took even 1 punch from the current Sora, he would die. But Sora grabbed Eiji by the shirt and, with a calm but chilling voice, told him not to worry. Eiji's eyes widened in disbelief as Sora raised his fist and delivered the first punch with immense force. Blood poured out of Eiji's mouth as he was struck, and Sora told him he was going easy on him. Without giving Eiji a chance to recover, Sora announced the second punch and hit him again with just as much power. Eiji staggered, clearly in terrible pain, while the other 2 boys who had been watching froze in fear, unable to move or speak. Then Sora delivered the third punch, shouting it out, and once again struck Eiji down with brutal strength. After that third punch, Eiji could no longer stand. He was weakening fast, bleeding heavily and covered in wounds. But Sora, standing tall and filled with determination, demanded him to get up. Eiji looked up with blood pouring from his mouth, and in a broken voice, begged Sora to stop and just kill him. But Sora did not stop. He delivered a heavy blow to Eiji's head, slamming him into the ground with such force that dust rose all around them. Eiji screamed out in agony, completely crushed by the power of the blow. Sora looked down at him, and, in his thoughts, felt a strange relief. He believed that this level of punishment where Eiji's limbs could no longer move and his eyes could not see was the fair price for all the pain he had caused in the past. With the punishment complete, Sora turned to the 2 boys who had watched everything in silence and fear. Their faces were pale with shock. Sora ordered them to take Eiji to the hospital. Without hesitation, and with trembling voices, they responded in panic, calling him sir and agreeing immediately. After delivering justice to Eiji, Sora stood over him one last time and gave a final warning. With a cold voice, he told Eiji never to show himself again. Then, without another word, Sora jumped high into the air and moved forward, leaving the broken battlefield behind. His eyes were sharp and focused as he thought to himself that the trash had been cleaned up, and now it was time to move on. He was going home. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, the story shifted to the city's buffer zone, a quiet place meant to be safe from monster attacks. There, 3 soldiers were standing together, chatting during their duty. One of them complained, saying he wished he had been assigned to wall patrol instead. Another agreed, saying wall patrol was safer since they didn't have to deal with monsters the way they did. But the first soldier, sounding careless and joking, said the second one was just being a coward. He teased him, saying that if a monster showed up, he might panic and fall off the wall. Their light conversation was quickly cut off when their leader arrived. With a serious expression, he told everyone to stay alert because a monster could appear at any time. His name was Kajura Tanji, and he was introduced as a second lieutenant, level 31 commander. The soldiers immediately stood at attention and saluted him. One of them, Matsura Shuki, a private first class and level 22 warrior, respectfully told the commander that the buffer zone was usually safe and that monsters from Area X rarely came this far. Still, he added that they would remain alert, just in case. As the soldier Matsura Shuki was still speaking confidently about how safe the buffer zone was, everything changed in an instant. Out of nowhere, a massive monster appeared. It had the shape of a giant octopus, with long, twisting limbs and one large, terrifying eye in the middle of its head. All the soldiers froze in shock at the sudden appearance. Before they could react, the monster moved quickly and violently, slicing one soldier's neck and cutting off his head in a single strike. Blood sprayed across the ground. The remaining soldiers screamed in fear, realizing that a real monster had arrived. One of them shouted in panic that it was a monster. The creature was identified as a kraken spawn, a powerful level 45 crustacean monster. Its size and strength overwhelmed the soldiers. One of them quickly tried to take control of the situation. He shouted at the others not to panic and told them to keep their formation and open fire. The soldiers followed the command and fired their guns at the beast, but their weapons had no effect. The bullets bounced off the creature's thick armor-like skin. One of the soldiers, clenching his teeth in frustration, shouted that the monster's level was too high and their weapons were useless. As the kraken spawn moved closer, another soldier shouted in fear that it was coming right at them. Commander Kajura, seeing the danger, immediately gave a loud order for everyone to scatter. But the monster attacked too fast. It started killing more soldiers, throwing its tentacles around and tearing through the group like paper. In anger, one brave soldier shouted at the beast, calling it a stupid octopus. Filled with rage, he rushed toward the monster, screaming that he would take it down, even if it cost him his life. But just as the soldier got close to the monster, something strange happened. The kraken spawn suddenly stopped moving. It lowered its limbs and backed away slowly. The attacking soldier paused in confusion, and another soldier murmured in disbelief, asking why the monster had stopped attacking. He guessed that the monster looked scared. The soldiers were shocked but hopeful. One of them, feeling encouraged, shouted that he did not know what the monster was afraid of, but now was their chance to fight back. One of them took a bold step. He threw a large bag filled with explosives directly at the kraken spawn and shouted for it to die. The soldiers quickly moved back, creating distance between themselves and the monster. A massive explosion followed, shaking the area and filling it with thick smoke. The blast was loud and powerful, and for a moment, it felt like they might have won. One of the soldiers, with wide eyes, asked if they had finally killed the monster. But as the smoke slowly cleared, their hope turned to horror. The kraken spawn still stood there, completely unharmed. It had not taken any damage at all. The soldier who had asked the question fell back to the ground in shock and screamed in fear that the monster was totally untouched. The kraken then raised one of its large legs and aimed to crush the fallen soldier. Just when it looked like the end for him, someone unexpected appeared. Sora came flying through the air and landed directly on top of the monster's head. With a powerful strike, he slashed the monster, and blood sprayed from the wound. In an instant, the tide of the battle turned. All the soldiers stood frozen in place, their eyes wide with disbelief. One of them murmured in shock, realizing the truth. They understood now why the monster had stopped attacking before. It had been afraid of Sora. He was the reason it had hesitated. Sora then stood tall on top of the now dead kraken spawn. Its body collapsed beneath him, and blood spilled across the ground. After the intense battle with the kraken spawn, everyone stood in shock. Kajura Tanji, the second lieutenant, looked at Sora with wide eyes. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. That monster had come out of a huge explosion without a single scratch, yet Sora had defeated it with just one powerful blow. Kujira knew that only a few people in the world had that kind of S-class destructive strength. But even with all his experience, he had never seen anyone like Sora before. Deep inside, he made a promise to himself no matter what it took, he would find out who this mysterious warrior was. At that moment, a special message appeared on Kujira's screen. It showed the words about special skill which he used: reconnaissance, advanced, able to view target information. The closer the level, the more details can be seen. Kujira stared at the Sora, hoping to get some answers about him. But suddenly, his eyes widened in shock. The system gave him a warning. Another message appeared: system warning, show respect. Kujira's face turned serious and confused. He clenched his teeth in frustration as he realized something unbelievable: he could not see any of Sora's information. It was like Sora was on a whole different level, beyond the system's ability to read. At the same time, chaos broke out nearby. A group of soldiers rushed in panic. Kujira had collapsed due to warning and unable to detect. Several soldiers tried to lift him up, holding his arms. One of them asked what was wrong, while others shouted in fear that the second lieutenant had collapsed and a medic needed to be called immediately. While all of this happened, Sora calmly turned his gaze toward the injured soldiers. Then he looked at Matsura Shuki, the young private who had been brave during the fight. Sora called out to him and said he wanted to ask something. Without hesitation, Matsura nodded and replied with respect that he was ready to answer. Sora turned and asked him how far Refuge Area 6 was from their current location. Matsura, still shocked by Sora's strength, replied with wide eyes that it was about 50 kilometers to the north. But he quickly added that the path passed through Area X. Sora looked confused and asked what Area X was. Matsura explained that Area X was a special zone where they were trying to hold back the monster rush. To reduce the damage caused by monsters in other places, they were focusing the monsters in that one area. Many hunters were fighting inside Area X, facing dangerous monsters. He also mentioned that defeating monsters in that area gave rare item drops, which made it a valuable but risky place. Sora listened carefully and realized something important. He thought to himself that people could defeat monsters in the real world and get item drops, just like in a video game. It surprised him that the world had changed so much. He then asked Matsura how strong the monsters were in that area. Matsura told him that the monster they had just fought was level 45, and that was already a pretty tough opponent for most of the soldiers and hunters. Sora was surprised that they were struggling so much with just a level 45 monster. He thought it was strange because to him, that kind of monster did not seem very powerful. With a small smile, he asked Matsura how many monsters above level 45 were in the monster rush. Matsura answered that there were maybe less than 100. If there were more of those kinds of monsters everywhere, then humans would have already been wiped out by now. Sora nodded as he understood the situation better. He thanked Matsura for the information and said goodbye. He seemed calm and confident, ready to continue his journey toward Refuge Area 6, even if he had to pass through a dangerous zone filled with monsters. As Sora turned to leave, Matsura suddenly called out and asked him to wait. Sora stopped and looked back at him. Matsura looked nervous but determined. He said that what he was about to ask might be selfish, but he still wanted to say it. Then he gave a deep, respectful bow and asked Sora if he would be willing to go to Area X. Matsura explained that with Sora's strength, he could save many people who were fighting and struggling in that dangerous zone. His voice was full of hope. Sora calmly asked if going through Area X was the shortest way to reach Refuge Area 6. Matsura quickly nodded. Hearing that, Sora agreed to go. Matsura looked surprised and asked if that meant Sora was really going. Before he could finish his sentence, Sora interrupted and confirmed it with a nod. He added that on his way to Area X, any monster unlucky enough to face him would be taken down without mercy. His words were calm but full of confidence and strength. The scene then changed to later that day at the rear of the front line, inside a military camp. Kujira Tanji, the second lieutenant, was lying unconscious on a soft foam bed. He had collapsed earlier due to injuries from the monster attack. Matsura stood beside him, smiling in relief. When Kujira slowly opened his eyes, Matsura called out to him happily and said he was finally awake. Kujira wiped his face and sat up slowly. He asked how long he had been unconscious. Matsuura replied that it had only been about 10 minutes. Then he showed Kujura a small glass tube in his hand. Inside it was a shiny liquid. He explained that it was a recovery item dropped by the monster, and it had worked instantly to help heal Kujura. Kujura then asked about the man who had saved them earlier from the Kraken's spawn. Matsuura answered simply that he had headed north. Kujura sat up and clutched his head, still feeling weak. He murmured the word north and suddenly realized something important. His eyes widened in shock as he asked Matsuura what he had just said. Matsuura replied nervously, saying that the powerful man who had saved them had headed north to return to Refuge Area 6. Kujura asked with urgency if he went through Area X. Matsuura confirmed it, though he looked confused and said that Sora did not seem worried at all. He left without any hesitation, as if passing through Area X was no big deal. Hearing that, Kujura's expression turned serious. He turned quickly and ordered Matsuura to contact Central Command right away. Matsuura looked confused and repeated the word Central Command, but followed the order. Kujura looked at his watch and thought to himself that there were still 10 minutes left until the scheduled time. He hoped Sora would make it before something terrible happened. Matsuura soon returned, standing at the gap in the camp's curtain. He informed Kujura that he had contacted Central Command using the emergency radio. He handed the phone to Kujura and asked why they needed to contact such an important office. Kujura looked at the radio with a serious face. He told Matsuura that this mission was very different from others and that the information was highly classified. That was the reason Matsuura and the other soldiers had not been told anything about it. As the phone screen started connecting, Kujura began to explain. He said that Area X, which everyone believed was a place used to hold back monsters, was actually something much worse. It was not just a battlefield. The truth was hidden from most people. The phone screen showed a signal called relay device, and at that moment, Kujura finally revealed the truth. He said with a heavy voice that Area X was actually a bombing zone. The scene moved to a large communication hall filled with many computer screens hanging on the walls and several people working at their stations. A girl was sitting on a chair with one hand placed over her headphones. She suddenly said that there was an emergency communication coming from Area B22. A serious-looking man sitting in the center of the hall heard her. He was introduced as Kumigaya Renji, the Central Commander and a level 58 flame magician. Without showing much emotion, he ordered her to patch the communication through. The girl nodded and quickly began typing on her computer. A few seconds later, Kujura's face appeared on the large screen. Kujura spoke with urgency. He gave the communication code BW3422 and reported his identity as Lieutenant Kujura. Then, he informed the Central Command that a mysterious hunter had just entered the bombing zone. He explained that this man didn't know about the secret operation taking place there. The commander, Kumigaya, responded with carelessness and a harsh tone. He asked if Kujura was just reporting his own failure. Hearing this, Kujura lowered his head slightly, clearly feeling disappointed and troubled. Still, Kujura spoke again, saying that he was not calling just to report his mistake. He suggested using the emergency broadcast system to warn the hunter about the upcoming bombing. Kumigaya tried to interrupt him angrily and began to speak louder, but Kujura cut him off with a sharp tone. He said that the mysterious man was extremely strong and that they could not afford to let someone like him die without warning. The scene opened in the communication hall, where tension filled the air. On the large monitor in front of them, Kujura appeared, connected remotely to deliver troubling news. Kumigaya sat in his chair with a puzzled expression and quietly murmured in confusion before asking about the situation. He wanted to know the level of the hunter who had entered the bombing zone. Kujura responded with sadness, saying that the hunter's level was unknown. The answer caused unease among the officers present. The hunter in charge took a deep breath and expressed his frustration. He pointed out how reckless it was that a hunter, whose level could not even be determined, had entered the dangerous bombing zone without permission or regard for the rules. He questioned why they were now being asked to issue an emergency alert for someone so careless. A girl standing behind Kumigaya commented coldly that the hunter would likely be killed by monsters before any alert could even be broadcast. Her words reflected the hopelessness they felt. Kumigaya smirked in response, clearly not taking the situation seriously. With a teasing tone, he remarked that the hunter might be foolish but at least seemed to have a talent for comedy. He added mockingly that the hunter was still lacking in training and clearly not capable of acting on his own yet. Then Kumigaya turned to a blonde-haired girl sitting next to him and directed his next words toward her. He told her that while he did not want to interfere with her subordinate, if he reported the hunter's actions to the higher-ups as an obstruction to the operation, she would also be held responsible. The blonde-haired girl, whose name was Tanasaki Miya, remained silent, but her sharp eyes showed her disapproval. She was the Western commander and a level 73 golem tamer, a strong and respected figure. In her mind, she questioned Kumigaya's attitude. Even when facing a powerful enemy, he still seemed more focused on pointing fingers and undermining others instead of uniting the team. Her thoughts revealed her growing frustration with the politics and selfishness around her, especially in such a dangerous time. Tanasaki Miya silently observed the heated situation. In her thoughts, she called Kumigaya foolish, clearly unimpressed by his behavior and narrow thinking. She then reflected with concern about Kujura, the officer she had personally raised with care and discipline. Her thoughts grew more serious as she wondered why someone like Kujura, known for following orders, would suddenly try to halt an important military operation just to protect an unknown individual. She questioned in her mind just how powerful that person must be to cause such a reaction in him. There was a heavy moment of silence between the military camp and the communication hall. Then, Tanasaki Miya finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. She addressed Kujura and said that while she believed he had no intention of obstructing the operation, if he could not give them a convincing reason for his actions, she would have no choice but to personally take him to a military tribunal. Her statement carried the weight of authority and disappointment. Kujura looked shocked and began to respond nervously, trying to explain himself. But Tanasaki did not wait for his excuses. She immediately turned to Kumigaya and asked him if her suggestion was acceptable. Kumigaya clenched his teeth in frustration. Despite his annoyance, he agreed and demanded Kujura to provide them with a reason they could accept. Kujura straightened himself and responded with strong determination. He finally told them that the unknown individual he was trying to protect had defeated a level 45 Kraken spawn with a single blow. His words sent a shockwave through the room. A heavy-set officer, hearing this, thought in disbelief and then shouted aloud in shock. He said the person had strength that was far beyond an A-rank hunter, and wondered if the individual could be an S-rank hunter secretly working with the military. However, Kumigaya shook his head and denied the possibility. With a thoughtful expression, he explained that all S-rank hunters were already on other missions and that the military had confirmed there were no signals or signs from the B-22 zone where S-rank hunters operated. This meant the unknown individual was not a registered elite, making his presence and strength even more mysterious and concerning. The tension continued to rise as Tanasaki Miya turned to Kujura, demanding to know why he could not determine the level of the unknown individual. She reminded him that his scouting skills should have revealed such information clearly. Kujura, still unsettled by what he had experienced, admitted that he had been unable to see the person's level at all. This confused Tanasaki, and her eyes widened in shock as she tried to make sense of it. Kujura then explained further, his expression serious and voice steady. He confessed that after using his scouting skill on the mysterious person, the amount of information that flooded his mind was so massive and overwhelming that he lost consciousness. This revelation left everyone in the communication hall stunned. They had never heard of such a thing happening before, especially not to someone of Kujura's skill level. Kumigaya finally broke the silence and spoke with a thoughtful tone. He said that if the information overflowed like that, then at the very least, the individual must be at level 100. He acknowledged that it was indeed an extraordinary strength. However, he firmly added that they could not halt the military operation just for the sake of one person, no matter how powerful he might be. Then an older man in the communication hall stepped forward to speak. He agreed with Kumigaya, saying that as soldiers, they had a duty to complete their mission and could not let uncertainty get in the way. This man was Yuasa Nobuo, the Eastern Commander, a level 44 rock magician. He continued with a detailed explanation of the current situation. He reminded them all that the operation involved 4 entire corps, made up of hundreds of thousands of troops. The plan had been carefully built with different zones, a buffer zone, a bombing zone, and multiple soldier stationing areas. Yuasa explained that they had enough personnel to completely surround the bombing and buffer zones. The original strategy was for soldiers in each area to eliminate any monsters that survived or escaped after the bombing. However, he warned that if they were to broadcast an emergency alert right now, the sound would echo through the area and attract all the monsters at once. Instead of staying scattered, the monsters would rush toward a single point of noise, causing that area to fall under immediate and complete destruction. Yuasa Nobuo continued speaking with deep concern. He explained that if they broadcasted an alert to save one person, it could cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Even if the person was an S-rank hunter, it was too great a risk to take. He ended his words with a heavy apology, making it clear that the military could not take such a chance. Kujura stood in shock, his heart clearly shaken by the decision. Meanwhile, Tanasaki Miya appeared thoughtful for a brief moment. Then, with a sharp gaze and calm authority, she confirmed the final decision. She declared that the proposal to stop the operation was rejected. She explained clearly that they could not throw away the hard work and lives of so many troops for the sake of just one individual. Her voice was final. There would be no more discussion. The operation would proceed as planned. Kujura and Matsuura both looked worried and shocked as the call came to an end. The large screen returned to silence, and the cold reality of the decision settled over the soldiers present. A wave of disappointment slowly spread across the camp. They had hoped for a different outcome, but now they had to accept it. With sadness in his voice, Matsuura called out to Kujura and reminded him that they had done everything they could. There was nothing more left to say. Kujura stood still, sadness in his eyes, but he tried to keep his posture strong. He clenched his fists tightly and responded with a strained voice, admitting that the bigger picture was more important than personal feelings. As Kujura spoke, Matsuura's eyes fell on a set of keys attached to Kujura's belt. Without warning, he quickly reached out and snatched the keys. Kujura reacted immediately with frustration and tried to stop him, but could not. He shouted at Matsuura in anger, trying to say something, but the other man had already turned and was running toward a nearby jeep. Realizing what was happening, Kujura shouted again, this time with urgency and worry. He told Matsuura to hurry back because the bombing would start soon. Matsuura said that there were still 6 minutes left before the bombing started. He quickly got into the driver's seat of the jeep, clenching his teeth and quietly telling himself that he could still make it in time. His motivation was clear. He was ready to risk everything to complete this mission. Outside the jeep, Kujura shouted loudly with frustration. He gave a strict order to Matsuura, warning him that if he did not return immediately, he would face a court-martial, a serious military punishment. He called him by his rank and full name, trying to make Matsuura listen and stop. But Matsuura did not hear him. Instead, he focused on driving the jeep fast toward his destination. The soldiers nearby watched in shock and confusion as the jeep sped away without stopping. One of the soldiers nervously asked Kujura if they should send people to bring Matsuura back. Kujura calmly shook his head and said no. He told them it was Matsuura's own decision, and he was ready to face whatever consequences came. Kujura understood that Matsuura was prepared to take this risk because he believed in what he was doing. Meanwhile, deep inside his mind, Matsuura thought with strong determination that no matter what happened, he would make it in time. He did not realize at that moment how important the person he was trying to save really was. That person, Sora, would soon become the hope of all humanity. The scene then shifted to Sora, who stood calmly in front of a large monster. With a sharp and powerful slash, Sora tore the monster into pieces without hesitation. Matsuura Shuki was speeding through the danger zone in a military jeep, desperately trying to locate Sora. As he drove, he muttered to himself in frustration, struggling to trace Sora's movements. He questioned how Sora could have disappeared so quickly and even wondered if Sora was moving faster than a car. That thought alone shocked him, but he did not slow down. He was determined to find the man who had saved his life earlier. As the jeep approached the edge of Area X, Matsuura began to consider risky options. He thought about using the jeep's loudspeaker to call out to Sora. He knew that doing so might attract nearby monsters, but he felt he had no choice. He decided that Sora had to be warned about the upcoming bombing, even if it meant putting himself in danger. He tested the speaker with a short blow and held it tightly, his hands trembling with tension. Deep inside, Matsuura thought of himself as unfit to be a soldier, but in that moment, he was showing true courage. He shouted through the loudspeaker with all his strength, reminding Sora that he was the soldier who had been saved earlier. He warned that the area would soon be bombed and begged whoever was listening to evacuate immediately. He repeated the warning, hoping Sora would hear it in time. Elsewhere, Sora stood calmly on the corpse of a large monster he had just defeated. When he heard the voice through the speaker, he turned his head slightly, his face filled with mild confusion. He murmured to himself about the bombing and questioned if there were no other hunters in the area. He found it strange because, to him, the monsters did not pose much of a threat. However, Sora then considered the real danger: the heat and force of the bombing. While the monsters were easy for him to handle, what moved him most, though, was the fact that a soldier had risked his life and come into this dangerous area just to warn him. That act of bravery and kindness touched him deeply. He could not ignore it. Sora made up his mind that he could not allow the soldier to die because of him. Inside the moving jeep, Matsuura felt anxious as he looked out the window. He wondered if his voice had reached Sora through the loudspeaker. He was worried and hoped the warning had not been wasted. Suddenly, in the sky, a monster appeared above. It flew down and landed heavily on the ground, shaking the earth around the jeep. Matsuura's eyes widened in shock. Fear rushed through him as he realized that his loudspeaker had truly attracted monsters. He shouted to himself that he had to escape quickly. He started the jeep again, but even as he tried to flee, his thoughts went back to Sora. He worried about whether Sora had heard him and if he was still alive. Before he could think further, Sora appeared out of nowhere and slammed the dragon-like monster to the ground, right in front of the jeep. Dust flew everywhere from the impact. Matsuura was stunned by the force and speed of Sora's attack. After defeating the monster, Sora calmly walked up to the jeep and knocked on the glass window to get Matsuura's attention. Matsuura quickly rolled down the window and said with relief that he was glad Sora was alive. There was clear joy and amazement in his eyes. Sora, still calm but curious, asked what Matsuura had meant earlier by bombing. However, there was no time to explain. Matsuura looked at the timer and realized in panic that time had run out. He shouted in worry that the bombing was about to begin. Suddenly, the ground shook violently as the bombing started. Explosions lit up the sky, and the buildings around them began to break apart and scatter from the force. But Sora did not hesitate. He raised his hand and created a powerful energy shield that covered both himself and the jeep. The shield blocked the flying stones and explosive force, protecting both of them completely. Matsuura looked around in awe. He had never seen such power before and was truly impressed. At the same time, back in the communication hall, a female soldier monitored the screens closely. She turned to Major General Kumagaya and reported that the bombing had been completed. Kumagaya, keeping a serious face, gave a direct order. He told her to launch the drones and check the status of the extermination. He also wanted to know where the remaining monsters were heading. A girl, who was monitoring the drones, checked the data and reported in a serious tone that no signs of life were detected in the area around the bombing zone. This was unexpected. Kumagaya, surprised and confused, asked where the monsters that had escaped earlier had gone. Suddenly, the girl gasped and reported in shock that the monsters were still inside the bombing zone. Even more shocking, the monsters that were at the very center of the bombing were completely unharmed. Kumagaya's eyes widened as he shouted in disbelief, saying it was impossible. The bombing should have destroyed everything in that zone. Beside him, Tanasaki Mie also stared at the screen with sharp, serious eyes. She demanded to see the footage from the drones to confirm what had happened. The girl quickly began typing and pulled up a video from one of the drones. In the footage, they all saw something shocking. A huge monster stood calmly, completely unharmed, and it was surrounded by a glowing shield. The girl narrowed her eyes, trying to understand. She wondered if the monster had created the shield. But then, to her surprise, she saw someone else inside the shield. It was not a monster, it was a human. Sora walked casually on the body of a defeated monster, showing no fear or damage. The room went silent for a second as everyone processed what they were seeing. Just then, the footage from the drone became blurry. The girl shouted that the drone had been attacked by a monster. A new video appeared from another drone flying directly above the scene. But that one also did not last long. The monster spotted it, reached up, and crushed the drone with its bare hands. The screen turned black. The girl turned back to the officers and reported that communication with the drones had been completely cut off. They had lost all visual contact. Tanasaki Mie stared at the blank screens with a deep frown and wide eyes. She realized something important. This attack on the drones was different from the past. It was not just wild violence. It showed intelligence. She spoke out with concern, saying that the monsters now seemed to understand that humans were using drones to gather information. Yuasa Nobuo, with a serious face and clenched teeth, gave the order to evacuate all soldiers stationed in the garrison area. Right after that, Tanasaki Mia stood up from her chair and shouted loudly that a full military retreat must begin and that the soldiers must protect the walls at all costs. But just as the orders were being carried out, the girl monitoring the drone footage noticed something strange. With shock in her voice, she said the monsters were not heading toward the walls as expected. Tanasaki Mia, surprised, asked where they were going if not toward the walls. The girl looked at the screen and informed everyone that the monsters were heading straight for Area B-22. Tanasaki Mia realized something important. Area B-22 was where the mysterious hunter, Sora, had last gone. With urgency and a sense of rage, she ordered that the remaining drones be sent to Area B-22. They had to confirm what exactly had caused the monsters to stop advancing earlier and understand what was going on in that dangerous zone. Meanwhile, back in the bombing area, Matsuura stepped out of the jeep, confused. He looked around at the smoke and broken buildings and realized with surprise that the bombing had stopped. Then he looked at himself and said with amazement that he had survived. He began to laugh joyfully and shouted that he was still alive. But Sora, always calm and serious, turned his head slightly and warned Matsuura not to celebrate too early. He explained that the monsters were still alive and heading toward them. Suddenly, Sora shouted for him to get down, and they both ducked just in time. A drone suddenly crashed onto the ground nearby, completely destroyed. Matsuura looked at the wrecked drone and asked in shock if that was one of the military drones. He could not believe it had been attacked. Something like this had never happened before. It was clear now that the monsters were not only surviving but also attacking the surveillance equipment. Sora, standing near the broken pieces of the building, focused on the approaching monsters. He told Matsuura to forget being surprised for now. There was no time to stand still or be amazed. They had to run. Matsuura stood frozen in shock as he saw a terrifying group of monsters appear in front of him. His eyes widened with fear when he noticed their levels. One was level 51, another level 53, and the last one level 56. He realized that this was the strongest group of monsters in the current monster rush, and the leader among them was level 90. Matsuura panicked and said with terror that even after the heavy bombing, these monsters had not taken any damage at all. He clutched his head with both hands and cried out that they were going to die there, helpless in front of such powerful creatures. But Sora remained completely calm. He looked at the monsters and pointed out that they themselves were also unharmed by the bombing. Then he smirked and said that if the bombs could not kill these monsters, he would simply beat them to death. With confidence and courage, Sora shouted to Matsuura to hide in the car and jumped high into the sky. With fast and powerful movements, Sora tore through the group of monsters, cutting them into many pieces. When one of the monsters swung a weapon at him, Sora casually stopped it with just one hand, showing no effort. The monster tried to fight back and reached out to grab Sora, but Sora jumped even higher and clenched his fist. Then, using all his power, he punched the monster on the head. The force was so strong that sparks flew, and the monster's head separated cleanly from its body. After defeating the monster, Sora stood calmly on its shoulder. As he looked ahead, he saw a boy covered in cloth standing in front of him. Sora was shocked as he thought to himself that he had not even sensed the presence of the boy now standing in front of him. The boy, who had a strange smile on his face, calmly said the words Abyss Seed. Love, like he understood something deeply. Right after he spoke, thick branches started growing out from the monster's neck. These branches quickly twisted and formed a new head on the monster's body, bringing it back to life. Then, with a dark and cold expression, the boy said that he had finally found Sora. The monster looked at Sora and spoke in a harsh voice, demanding Sora to return something it claimed was stolen. It called Sora a thief and shouted to give back what belonged to it. Sora, confused, asked what they were talking about since he had no idea what they meant. But the boy didn't give any more explanation. Instead, he gathered a powerful energy into his hand and shouted that Sora would pay with his life for the crime of using someone else's power. The boy launched sharp-edged spears made of energy straight at Sora. But Sora stayed calm. He caught the spears with his bare hands easily, and then turned his head slightly while pointing the weapon back at the boy. He confidently said that someone at that level could not possibly kill him. As the monster beside him tried to place a hand on shoulder to grab him. Meanwhile, several drones flew above them, recording the scene. The boy looked up and noticed the drones. His eyes narrowed in confusion as he thought the watcher was Odin's crow, a legendary spy. But then he quickly realized it was only a fake version, created by humans, just a man-made drone trying to imitate the real thing. Sora showed strong determination as he stopped the monster's hand with his other hand. His eyes shone brightly with focus and willpower. He told the enemy that if they truly wanted to kill him, they should take the fight seriously and come at him with full power. Without waiting, Sora shouted loudly and charged forward, aiming his spear straight at the boy's head. But just before the spear could hit, the boy suddenly disappeared without any warning. Instead of striking the boy, Sora accidentally hit the monster standing next to him with great force. He looked around, confused and surprised, thinking to himself that the boy had vanished without leaving any trace. Suddenly, the boy reappeared near the ground, crouched low, and glanced up at a drone flying above them. Speaking in an annoyed voice, the boy said it was unpleasant to be watched by lowly humans. He insulted the drone by calling it a weak and worthless machine that made him feel sick. Then, without hesitation, the boy attacked the drone and destroyed it completely. The drone started sparking and smoking as it fell from the sky, ending in a crash. The boy smiled confidently and ordered to get rid of all the guards around them, showing he was ready to fight anyone who came near. Not far away from the battle, a man was hiding behind a wall, carefully watching everything that was happening. He muttered in frustration, upset that the drone had been destroyed. Holding a remote control in his hand, he reminded himself that their mission was still not finished. He noticed that because of Sora's actions, the monsters had changed their path and moved in a different direction. As he looked at the screen showing Sora fighting alone, the man thought deeply. He realized this mysterious hunter had bravely jumped into the fight by himself to stop the monsters. Quickly, he decided he must report Sora's actions to their commander. The man who had been hiding behind the wall now felt completely helpless and sat down on the ground, unable to move. Suddenly, many monsters started pouring into the building through its door. As the monsters got closer to him, the man froze in fear, feeling trapped, and whispered quietly to himself that the monsters had found him, and there was no way to escape. Outside the building, Sora heard the man's terrified scream. He quickly turned his head toward the source of the sound and saw the building filled with monsters moving inside. At that moment, the boy laughed loudly in a cruel way. He shouted harsh orders to his minions, commanding them to kill everyone nearby without mercy. Sora looked at the boy and suddenly remembered the words Matsuura had told him earlier. Matsuura had said Sora looked like a strong hunter who would save many people. Sora also remembered Matsuura's warning that the area was going to be bombed soon. Flying high into the sky, Sora decided to start by hunting down the boy. He understood that defeating the boy quickly was the best way to save as many lives as possible. Sora also noticed that the monster attacks had become stronger since the boy had fused with their power. While flying, some monsters tried to attack him, but Sora skillfully avoided their attacks without getting hurt. After dodging the monsters' attacks, Sora landed firmly on the ground, ready to face the enemy. As soon as he touched the ground, the boy rushed toward him again. This time, the boy's body was surrounded by dark energy, showing how dangerous and powerful he had become. Sora watched him calmly and thought that the boy was being too persistent by attacking him again and again without giving up. As Sora looked closely at the boy's face, his eyes widened in shock. He realized that the boy looked exactly like him. This unexpected discovery confused him deeply. The boy, now standing right in front of Sora, began to form a sword out of dark energy. Sora could feel the intense power vibrating from the weapon, and he immediately sensed it was dangerous. He thought to himself that this sword was no ordinary weapon and could be bad news. The boy smirked with glowing eyes and shouted that he would kill Sora, calling him Abyss Seed and claiming it was Sora's destiny to die. As the boy slashed the sword toward him, Sora quickly dodged by moving his body aside just in time. He then responded with a powerful punch to the boy's arm, and managed to grab the dark sword with his own hand. The boy growled and clenched his teeth in frustration. Sora raised the sword high above his head and slammed it into the ground with force. As the sword hit the ground, a large crack or path appeared in front of him, splitting the earth. He looked down at the sword with surprise and confusion, thinking that something strange had just happened. He wondered if the power had been cancelled or if he was imagining things. Then he realized that the energy he felt just now was the same as the mysterious power known as the Abyss. This made Sora even more uncertain about what he was really facing and what kind of connection he had with this strange and powerful boy. The boy who looked like Sora was flying high above the ground. His expression twisted into mockery as he clenched his teeth and shouted that taking away others' weapons was the only thing Sora seemed capable of. On the ground, Sora stood silently, gripping the mysterious dark sword. But then, something strange happened. The sword slowly started vanishing right from his hands. Sora stared at it in confusion and thought that it had disappeared. He realized that the power of the abyss was even more unpredictable than he had imagined. He braced himself mentally, understanding that this battle might not end anytime soon. Turning his attention to the nearby jeep, where Matsuura sat watching the fight, Sora grew concerned. He knew he had to move Matsuura to safety before continuing. Looking at the vehicle's glass window, he asked Matsuura if he was good with heights. Matsuura looked confused but gave a small nod in response. Without wasting any more time, Sora placed both hands under the jeep, dug deep, and lifted it. Then, with a calm but determined voice, he said that they were going to fly. He held the jeep carefully on his shoulder and began rising from the ground, aiming to take Matsuura somewhere far from danger. Meanwhile, the boy in the sky smirked as if amused by Sora's decision. He shouted that Sora was a fool for underestimating the power of the abyss. The boy started creating a dark sphere filled with swirling, dangerous mana. He sneered and declared that the strong did not exist to protect the weak, they existed to become the strongest. Then, without mercy, he hurled the dark sphere down towards Sora and the jeep, intending to destroy both the protector and the one he was trying to save. Sora quickly turned his head as he flew and realized the enemy was extremely fast. He thought that even if he tried to escape, the boy would catch up without much effort. Understanding that running would not help, Sora gently placed the jeep back on the ground and made a decision to fight head-on. He leapt high into the air, heading straight toward the large dark ball coming at him, and shouted with determination that he would destroy his enemy. As he flew upward, he charged his fist with glowing energy and punched the dark ball with full force. For a moment, he hoped he had succeeded, but as the outer layer of the ball broke apart, he saw something worse inside the ball. Another sphere was hidden, still untouched. Sora's eyes widened as he realized the truth. That attack had done nothing. The real danger, the core of the enemy's power, was still protected and unharmed. That inner ball was the boy's main weapon. Then, without warning, a strange new threat appeared. Thick root-like structures made entirely of dark mana began rising from the ground and stretched toward the jeep. They moved like living things, wrapping themselves around the vehicle as if trying to trap it. Sora looked down in alarm and shouted to Matsuura, telling him to get out of the car quickly. Inside the jeep, Matsuura's face turned pale with fear. He was frozen in shock, sadness, and terror, staring at the growing, twisting roots. His lips trembled as he begged them not to come any closer. Suddenly, the boy's voice echoed coldly through the air, speaking directly to Matsuura. He told him not to be scared, calling him a poor little lamb. Then, in a twisted tone of false kindness, the boy said he would send him home. At that moment, the dark roots lifted the jeep high into the air, carrying Matsuura with it. Sora's eyes burned with fury as he watched. He clenched his fists and shouted in frustration. As the jeep floated in the air, the boy calmly walked on top of it and looked down at Sora with a mocking smile. He asked Sora if he was angry and told him not to be so hasty. His tone was cold, as if enjoying the pain he was causing. Then, the boy bent down and looked inside the jeep, where Matsuura's body was still trapped. Dark mana roots had pierced through Matsuura's body, leaving many holes. Yet somehow, Matsuura was still alive, barely holding on. The boy pointed at him and said with cruel sarcasm that Matsuura was not dead yet, and told Sora to look closely because he was even smiling. But the smile on Matsuura's face was not natural. His face was twisted, almost as if he had been turned into something monstrous. The boy laughed in a twisted way and said that everyone Sora cared about would die right in front of him. He shouted that this was Sora's wonderful destiny as someone cursed by the abyss. Sora's eyes sharpened with rage as he stared back. He asked the boy if he enjoyed crushing the dignity of others. The boy only laughed louder and suddenly attacked Sora with a powerful move called Obsidian Storm. Dark, sharp stones shot through the air and hit Sora hard. Blood flew from his wounds, staining the sky. As he took the hits, Sora muttered that he understood now. But the boy was not done. He attacked even more violently, creating a large explosion around Sora. The air shook from the blast, and the area filled with smoke and pressure. Through the pain, Sora clenched his fists tightly, burning with fury. He shouted in anger that trash like the boy made him want to vomit. His voice was filled with disgust and hatred. Then, with sharp focus, Sora found the main source of the root-like structures. He struck it with all his power, and the core of the roots shattered. Instantly, The dark roots broke into pieces and vanished. The jeep, now free from the grip of the abyss roots, started to fall back to the ground. Sora stared at the jeep that had fallen hard to the ground. The impact kicked up a thick cloud of dust, swirling around the wreckage. His heart ached as he walked toward the vehicle. Inside, Matsura's body, now twisted and changed by the abyss's dark power, lay silent. Sora gently picked him up, looking down at what his friend had become. His eyes were filled with sadness as he quietly apologized, saying he was sorry that Matsura had been caught up in this terrible fight. Carefully, he laid Matsura's body back into the jeep, treating it with respect, even though the man had been turned into a monster. As Sora turned around, he sensed the boy standing behind him once again. Without hesitation, Sora rushed at him, his fists clenched tightly, filled with rage and determination. He swung his fist with full force and punched the boy, hoping to end it there. But the boy laughed and said it was useless. In an instant, a dark sword appeared in the boy's hand, glowing with dangerous energy. With a mocking smile, the boy taunted Sora, saying that someone like him, a rookie who could not even use the abyss's power properly, had no chance of defeating him. But Sora stayed calm, refusing to be provoked. Instead of giving up, he launched another powerful punch right at the boy's face. This time, the punch landed perfectly, and blood spilled from the boy's mouth. The force of the hit sent him flying backward. He crashed into the ground so hard that the dust exploded around him, covering the area in smoke once again. Sora stood tall, breathing heavily, but his voice was steady as he said that the boy was not his true opponent. The boy, still lying on the ground and feeling the sting of Sora's punch, shouted in disbelief. He could not believe it, and yelled that there was no way Sora had damaged him. His voice was filled with shock. But Sora did not stop. He ran toward the boy again and shouted back with fire in his voice that humans grow. He called the boy an idiot for underestimating him. The boy's expression turned serious as he clenched his teeth tightly. He admitted that things were going badly and cursed under his breath. He realized, with fear, that Sora was able to control the abyss's power just by watching his techniques. But then, to the boy's surprise, Sora suddenly stopped and moved backward instead of attacking. Confused, the boy asked where he was going. For a moment, he looked around, trying to understand Sora's next move. That was when Sora, with swift movement, appeared behind him. He jumped high into the air, preparing for strong attack from above. However, the boy reacted quickly. He was faster than Sora had expected. Just before the attack landed, the boy jumped down from the shoulder of the monster and landed safely on the ground. While standing there, catching his breath, he admitted that Sora was tougher than he had thought. His tone was no longer mocking but serious. Sora, now hovering in the air with a sharp gaze, stared down at him. He said that even if the boy could run, the massive creature standing behind him, the monster, could not escape. The battle continued to grow more intense as Sora focused his energy and used a powerful technique. A bright splash of energy shot through the air and struck the ground, cutting right through the body of the giant monster. The boy watched with wide eyes and thought in shock that Sora was trying to use the same technique again. But this time, Sora had improved. He shouted with determination that he would crush the main body's core. As Sora activated his ability, many root-like structures made of energy rose around him, glowing with power. The boy stood frozen, thinking it could not be possible. He could not believe what he was seeing. Just then, the sun suddenly shone brighter in the sky. Its light hit the dark roots surrounding Sora, and the roots made of dark mana started burning in the sunlight. At the same time, the large monstrous body that had been standing behind the boy began to disappear, breaking apart as if it were melting. Sora jumped back down to the ground, landing safely as the last of the creature vanished. Standing firm, Sora looked directly at the boy with sharp eyes. He spoke with strong intent, saying that the next one to fall would be him. The boy, feeling cornered and furious, raised both of his hands above his head and began gathering dark mana into a massive energy ball. He shouted with frustration that he would remember this and called out the name of his final technique, Shadow Unity. As he formed the dark energy ball, something strange began to happen. All around the battlefield, monsters made of dark mana began appearing. They were all different shapes and sizes, but they were not there to fight. Instead, they were drawn to the ball of energy the boy had created. One by one, they started to die, their bodies breaking apart and mana being absorbed into the ball. The energy within the ball grew stronger and darker as all of the creatures became part of it. The dark storm created by the boy's final technique raged violently, and Sora had to cover his body with his arms to protect himself from the pressure and energy around him. The force was strong, and the ground shook, but Sora held his ground. After a while, the storm slowly faded and the area became quiet again. Sora looked around carefully, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. He realized with frustration that the boy had used that massive technique only as a distraction to escape. Sora let out a tired sigh and muttered that his clothes were in pieces after the fight. As he took a moment to calm himself, his eyes landed on the small photo he always carried. It was a picture of his mom and dad. He picked it up and looked at it with a soft smile, feeling relief that it had survived the battle. He said he was glad the photo was still safe. Then, remembering Matsura, he walked toward the jeep. He opened the door and looked inside. Matsura was still lying there, unconscious but alive, resting on the seat. Sora looked at him with concern and said quietly that Matsura's family must be waiting for him. Sora leaned in and gently removed a small locket from around Matsura's neck. He held the necklace in his hand, gripping it tightly with deep feeling. His eyes burned with determination as he thought to himself that he would take Matsura home. There was no way the Shadow Boy was really finished. That enemy had absorbed the power of so many dark creatures he could attack again at any moment. Sora knew he had to be ready for whatever came next. But as he stood there holding the locket, a dark memory came back to him, the boy's cruel words during the battle. He remembered how the boy had told him that everyone he cared about would die right in front of him. That this was his terrible fate as the Abyss Seed. Sora suddenly became worried as a serious thought entered his mind. He realized that it would be dangerous if the shadow enemy reached the evacuation center before him. With that fear rising in his heart, he knew he could not waste any time. He had to go back quickly. Without hesitation, he rushed toward his destination at an incredible speed. He moved so fast that it looked like the air itself was being pushed aside by his presence. Some time later, Tanasaki Mie and her team of soldiers arrived at the scene where the bombing had taken place. The area was filled with destruction, broken buildings, rubble, and signs of a massive battle. As she looked around with sharp eyes, Tanasaki turned her head toward one of the soldiers and gave a strong command. She ordered the drone squad to carefully investigate the surroundings and said that not even a rat should be allowed to slip by unnoticed. She also told all the other teams to stay alert and ready for anything. The soldiers began spreading out, walking toward the highest point of the ruined area. One of them looked at his screen in shock and called out to the chief. His eyes were wide as he noticed something unexpected. But Tanasaki, standing high on a pile of stones and broken buildings, interrupted him before he could finish. She had already seen what he was talking about. All around them, the bodies of defeated monsters were scattered on the ground. She confirmed that all the enemies had already been taken down. Without wasting time, she turned her head and shouted new orders. She told the team to search for any remaining drones, to collect any kind of information they could find, and to report anything important immediately. One of the soldiers nodded in response while looking at his screen and got to work. Meanwhile, Tanasaki clenched her teeth as she thought deeply. She noticed clear signs of a fierce fight in the area. She remembered how Lieutenant Kajura had said that a strong hunter had survived the bombing. Now, as she looked around at all the fallen monsters, she wondered in amazement, did that single hunter really wipe out all the enemies while moving through this place? As Tanasaki Mie stood deep in thought, trying to make sense of everything that had happened, one of the soldiers suddenly shouted for her attention. He was standing near a drone that had fallen to the ground during the battle. She quickly turned her gaze toward him as the soldier pointed to the broken machine and explained with urgency that the drone's storage device was still working. He said he would extract its footage right away. After a moment, the soldier recovered the storage device and handed the screen to Tanasaki. She accepted it and stared at the footage, saying aloud that they should see what it had recorded. As she watched the screen carefully, her eyes widened with realization. She recognized Private First Class Matsura Shuki in the video. He had charged into the bombing zone bravely. But what caught her attention even more was the figure next to him, the powerful hunter who had fought the monsters. She understood that this must have been the same person who defeated all the enemies. Meanwhile, other soldiers were still searching the area carefully. As one of them moved through the debris, a strange glowing light caught his attention. He looked at it with confusion, trying to figure out what it was. Then, a message appeared in front of him like a floating screen. The message listed 3 rewards earned by defeating the monsters. The first notification said, Special energy potion, permanently increases the upper limit of magic. The second said, a class weapon, ancient royal dagger. The third notification read, cannot be identified. The soldier stared at the glowing message, trying to understand what it all meant. Just then, another soldier behind him called out and asked what he had found. As soon as the glowing items appeared, the soldier who first discovered them became nervous. He panicked and quickly said nothing while trying to hide the items in his hands. But his companion did not believe him. With a sharp look, he stepped closer and saw the items himself. A smile spread across his face as he realized what they were. He said that it looked like the leader of the monster rush had dropped some rare items. Then, his voice turned serious and strict. He reminded the panicked soldier that it was a serious crime to take items found by the unit for personal use. He asked if the soldier understood that. For a moment, the nervous soldier's eyes widened. Then his gaze turned sharp and he asked in a low voice how they should split the items between them. But his companion stayed calm and cold. He looked at one of the items, a strange box that could not be identified, and said with a chilling tone that he only wanted that one. The other soldier refused and argued that the box looked important. He believed it might contain legendary items and was not ready to let it go so easily. That made his companion angry. He stepped closer, his expression turning dark and threatening. He called the other soldier a rookie and said that he did not have the right to choose anything. The pressure and fear made the nervous soldier give in. He handed over the mysterious box to his companion and turned away. Holding the box in his hands, the companion let out a mocking laugh. His face lit up with twisted excitement as he looked at the box and spoke in a low, greedy voice. He said that he finally had it, the golem's relic. The way he said it made it clear that they had been waiting a long time for this moment. At Shelter 6, Sura leaps onto the rooftop and calls out his arrival, then notices a crowd of people stationed below, keeping watch over the place. He muses that it seems no raid has started yet and begins walking inside, drawing startled looks from those around him. Bare-chested and covered in bruises and cuts, he wonders if their reaction comes from not recognizing him or simply from seeing the state of his body. As his eyes scan the area, he notes the absence of the one he seeks and concludes that there are no strong figures here, which spells ruin for this shelter. Before he can go further, a man wearing a rice hat steps in his way, and Sura quickly questions if the man might be blind. The stranger remarks on the heavy scent of blood clinging to him and asks if he is an outsider, to which Sura calmly affirms. With a laugh, the man assures he means no harm, saying he only wishes to purchase information about the outset and will be pleased if Sura can provide it. He pulls out cash and offers it, leaving Sura briefly wondering if this is the currency used here before agreeing to speak. The man calls it great, but pauses, demanding first to know why Sura referred to him as His Excellency, accusing him of being a fraud. The so-called monk chuckles, admitting that his title and attire are nothing more than a personal hobby, which prompts Sura to ask if concealing his eyes is also part of that pastime. Amused yet irritated, the monk calls him troublesome and removes his blindfold, explaining with a grin that he has developed an eye condition recently. Sura thinks to himself that even with the man's eyes hidden, he can still see a terrifying glow, proof that his strength is being suppressed for reasons unknown, like a tiger disguised as a sheep within this shelter. Out loud he asks what the man wants to know, and the reply comes eagerly that he seeks news from outside since soldiers and weapons have been gathered along the walls. Sura tells him they appear to be preparing for battle while civilians remain unaware, adding that he heard an explosion beyond the walls. Pressed for details, he jokingly blurts that he was relieving himself when the blast came from the southwest, so startled that he ran out unclothed, forgetting the paper, and bursts into laughter. The man laughs as well, amused and thinking Sura must also be concealing his strength, then hands him money in thanks, satisfied to have learned the direction. As the man walks off, Sura watches and thinks he is heading toward the fallen area and wonders how many in this place are as strong as him, realizing he cannot act rashly. More troubling is how they allow someone suspicious like him to move freely, perhaps because they share a common enemy. Later, after shopping and buying new clothes with the monk's money, he steps out dressed and decides to search for his parents in an ordinary way. Pulling out a family photo, he stops a girl and politely asks if she has seen the couple in the picture. She turns pale in fright, shouts that she does not know, and hurries away, leaving him baffled at her ghost-like reaction and wondering if people here are unusually wary of the strong. From behind, a man's voice breaks in, demanding what he is looking at, and Sura decides he may have no choice but to question him instead. The man, calling out to someone about bread, suddenly glares fiercely as Sura confronts him and asks what he means. The stranger dismisses him, scoffing that this is no time or place to flirt with photos. But when Sura shows him the picture, his eyes widen in shock as he demands to know why he has it. Sura calmly presses back, asking if he recognizes them. The man narrows his eyes and demands to know Sura's relationship with the couple, to which Sura firmly replies that he is their son. Glancing between Sura and the photo, the man sees an image of Sura dead and accuses him of mocking him. At that moment, a bus barrels down the street, brakes screeching before it crashes into Sura, glass shattering across the ground, yet he stands unshaken, the vehicle brought to a halt against him. With an edge in his voice, Sura warns that he does not want to hear those words again. The man hesitates, then suddenly cries out in recognition, saying it truly is him and that it has been ages, before pointing him straight up the road where his parents live. Sura steadies himself and moves ahead, giving thanks, while the man watches with alarm and runs off, muttering that they are in serious trouble and must gather everyone. As Sura walks on, he wonders why even a thug like that would know his parents, then recalls how his father had always been kind and his mother much the same. They may have been ordinary in their world, but now that he is here, he vows they will be fine. Arriving before the house, he notes the abundance of empty homes from the declining population and reassures himself this is the right place. A faint voice drifts from inside asking if work is finished for the day, and he knocks, unnerved by how lifeless it sounds. The door opens to a man greeting him as though returning home, but when his eyes settle on Sura, he reels back in shock. Growing furious, the man demands to know who stands before him, and Sura answers steadily by giving his name, leaving the man in a state of deep confusion. Inside the house, Sura and the man sit in silence until a woman, meant to be his mother, enters with tea, apologizing for the wait and setting the cups on the table. She asks if they have not spoken a single word since earlier, and the man admits it is hard to accept because the son before him feels like a completely different person. He adds that in such moments what Sura needs is something, but when Sura asks what, the man only says it is a secret and urges him to trust him. Inwardly he vows not to disgrace himself before his wife and warns through his eyes to the hidden subordinate above that if Sura utters anything suspicious, even in jest, he must be seized at once. Meanwhile, Sura notices one of his father's men lurking overhead and finds it reassuring despite the man's caution, thinking to himself that the subordinate is about to hear more than he should. Then he speaks aloud, reminding his father of how he used to attend the housewives' support group every week for cooking lessons, a revelation that strikes him dumb with shock. The hidden subordinate nearly loses composure, stunned by the mention of such a mundane secret. Sura continues, exposing how he secretly joined ballet classes each week without telling his children, an image that sends the subordinate's mind spiraling into absurd imaginings of his superior in such attire. Ashamed yet forced to laugh, the father admits it is true, but argues that even someone other than his son might have known. Sura presses further, asking if they should talk about matters inside the house, and with a smirk, the father challenges him to reveal something. Beads of sweat form as he demands Sura speak, and Sura calmly points to the katana, declaring that the Japanese sword is only a replica. From above, the guard mutter in disbelief at the claim, and the father bursts out angrily, demanding proof and refusing to accept it. Sura rises with the sword in hand and declares he can prove it, pointing out the bite mark left by his brother on the hilt. The hidden guards reels in shock, recognizing it as the same scar said to be from when their boss, bound in chains, bit the blade and slaughtered 38 men, and suspects Sura is spinning this tale only to lower their guard and strike down the head. Sura unsheathes the weapon, marveling at its edge and remarking how it extends and contracts, when suddenly his father shouts at him for being reckless, rushes forward, and embraces him tightly. Tears stream down as he cries that Sura has finally returned, confessing that in the desperate search to find him he had unknowingly risen to the position of boss, and now he weeps openly in shame. Sura calmly asks if the guards above can be dismissed, while the guards trembles at the sight of the once fearsome leader breaking down, thinking it is the first time he has seen him value family over blood. Panicked, he tries to retreat, but a hand shoots up through the hole, seizing his leg, and Sura drags him back, coldly saying their father wishes to talk. Later, with all four seated again, the father chastises the man for being the most loose-tongued of his guards, and Sura warns that if word leaks, it will be his responsibility. Shaken, the guard swears he will never tell, and under the sharp gazes of both father and son, he admits to himself that their bond is undeniable. The mother interjects, urging them not to bully him, but then sternly adds that he absolutely must keep quiet, and he bows his head in agreement. The father sighs in relief that no one mentioned his habit of snoring and farting in his sleep, only for his wife to scold him for not admitting it himself, while Sura smiles inwardly, feeling for the first time that he has truly returned from the abyss. Just as that warmth settles, the door bursts open and the same man from earlier storms in, shouting urgently about the white-haired brat, only to stop dead in shock at the sight of Sura sitting calmly inside, flanked now by a crowd of guards. As the four sit together, the door slams open and the man from earlier barges in with a squad of guards. Sura calmly asks if the white-haired brat he mentioned refers to him, and the man, trembling yet shouting, confirms it is and tries to rally courage by boasting that though Sura may be strong, they hold the numbers, accusing him of messing with their men and demanding if he belongs to Kushu Tiger Hall. His bravado collapses when Sura grips both his legs and lifts him with terrifying ease, then turns to his father and asks for an introduction. The father declares this is his son Sura, who vanished 5 years ago and has now returned, but falters when he realizes he never actually knew his son's level. Hesitating, he falls silent until Sura himself admits that he has no system, shocking everyone present. Gasps erupt as they cry that no one could possibly survive 5 years in a fallen home without a system, insisting that no matter how much one trains, it is impossible to surpass level 10. Confusion spreads as they argue he must be just a rookie, though doubt gnaws at them after witnessing his unshaken body stop a bus earlier. Watching their disbelief, Sura suggests they use their system to check his level, and they reluctantly agree. One of the men explains that while a system allows reading monster levels, without the rare scout's skill it is impossible to see another person's, adding that their boss happens to possess it. Sura turns to his father and asks him to test it, hoping for some clue about the abyss. His mother, however, admits she cares only about staying close to him, and his father quietly says he already knows enough. The guards lean in anxiously, demanding to hear the result, but the father admits that no matter how many times he tries, no information appears at all. That leaves only two possibilities: either Sura truly has no system, or his level is so high that it lies beyond even his reach. Everyone leans forward, desperate to know Sura's level, when a screen flickers visible with the notification of his name, prompting the father to remark that even without a system he can still see that much. He reasons that since Sura survived alone for 5 years, he cannot possibly be a rookie, for such a one would have long perished, and though he cannot detect his level, it must be far beyond ordinary. Shaken, he demands to know what his son endured all those years, but the mother gently interrupts, saying they should simply be glad he is strong enough to return. Turning to Sura, she cups his face tenderly, telling him he must have gone through countless hardships to make it home. Overcome, Sura recalls his struggles and embraces her, tears streaming as he tells her not to cry because he is fine and has finally made it back. Both weep together until the father, watching with moist eyes, can no longer hold back. He ushers the guards out of the room, telling them to give space for this reunion, and closes the door firmly behind him. Standing outside, he asks his men about Jiro and other worried since they left 2 hours earlier and have yet to return. Meanwhile, inside the house as night settles, mother and son continue talking closely. Sura asks after his older brother, fearing something might have happened, but she reassures him that he simply seldom comes home because of his military service. She shows him a photo on her phone and promises to call him now that Sura has returned, explaining he is stationed at the front lines as though waging his own revenge against their enemies. Sura nods quietly, saying it has been so long since he last saw him, then asks if his mother holds a high rank here. She smiles and admits she has a position, but says her true value lies in being a cleric whose wide range of healing and prophecy skills make her an ultimate support. Sura snaps to attention, asking if that means she can see his status, but she shakes her head, explaining she lacks the skill for that. When he presses why, she places a hand against his cheek once more, softly reminding him that clerics use prophecy, and that she had always known he would return someday. As the night grows deeper, a sudden knock echoes at the door, and the man rises to answer it, calling out to know who is there. When he opens it, a large crowd stands outside, and at the front looms a towering muscular figure. The moment his eyes fall on him, the man stiffens in shock, blurting out in disbelief the title of vice captain. The head opens the door and greets the muscular man with a calm welcome, addressing him as Jiro, the Union Guild's vice captain. He immediately notices the sour expression on his face and asks what happened, pressing for the results of the secret investigation. Clearly agitated, Jiro reports that as suspected, the Tiger Roar Guild is tied to the military, explaining how they handed over monster forces only for the military to send some nitpicking clerk who slashed their payout in half with excuses of excessive damage. Afterward, the military still reported the full total to their superiors, with the difference funneled straight to Tiger Roar. The head mutters in disbelief, noting how Tiger Roar had always kept a neutral stance, and if they are pulling such tricks, something serious is brewing. Declaring that it cannot be ignored lest it affect the town's future, he resolves to visit Tiger Roar himself, gripping his sword and vowing to remind them the Union Guild does not play nice. Inside his room, Sura overhears every word thanks to his heightened senses, realizing Tiger Roar might be linked to the robbers in Kagawa, and fearing for his father who now intends to confront them. He rises and steps into the hall where he meets both his father and Jiro, firmly declaring that he is coming along. The guards exchange wary looks, thinking he is walking into danger but also eager to witness his true ability. Jiro turns to study him and asks who he is, prompting the head to introduce him as his son Sura, lost in the Fallen Zone for 5 years. Shocked, Jiro asks about his level, but the head explains he has no system. Dismissing him as an ordinary man, Jiro reasons that even 3 days in the Fallen Zone is a miracle, and without a system or job skill he would only be dead weight despite whatever physical strength or survival instincts carried him so far. Out loud, he suggests Sura is better off resting after his ordeal. The father quickly agrees, telling him to stay with his mother, who steps forward to back him up, reminding him he has not even had a proper chance to settle in at home. Sura grows tense at their words, understanding why they view him as a liability without a system, yet silently stewing over how little they know of what he endured and how little he himself understands about how this shelter functions. As the weight of his thoughts pressed heavier, Sura decided that if monsters were truly as dreadful as he imagined, he should keep his strength hidden for now so he would not drag his father or the others into danger. He reluctantly agreed to stay behind, and the men exchanged doubtful looks at his sudden compliance before marching off together with shouts of resolve. Left at the doorway, his mother gently told him not to let it trouble him, explaining that his father only worried because now that they were finally reunited, he did not want Sura facing danger again. He started to argue, but she shook her head with a calm smile, saying his father was strong and always returned safe, just as her visions foretold this time as well. Sura sighed and said he was no longer a child, though inwardly he admitted that while her prophecies could foresee danger, Tiger Roar being backed by the military meant that clashes with his father were bound to escalate. He asked about the situation in the shelter and the cause of the conflict, so she explained that after Judgment Day, the organization Awaken had formed hunter guilds to manage shelters alongside the military. Here in Shelter 6, his father had founded the Union Guild with the sole purpose of searching for him, and his motto of fighting to reunite families had deeply moved the people. That was how the guild had grown so strong, handling security, resource gathering, and monster disposal while leaving raids and tower exploration to the military. She said his father had always refused to send guild members into raids out of kindness, which had kept the shelter safe for years. But a few months ago, Tiger Roar, a powerful guild from Shelter 4, had established a branch here, and ever since, tensions never ceased. When Sura asked why the military did not intervene, she answered that enemies had grown too powerful for the army alone to manage. Tiger Roar specialized in clearing towers and their strength was overwhelming, so the military had no choice but to depend on them. She went on, explaining that tower rewards were so great the military could not ignore them, and Tiger Roar's greatest weapon was the awakened one chosen by the tower deity, a being known as Esra. When he asked what that meant, she said the deity ruled the tower with power so immense it was nearly divine, and those who passed its trial became Esra, blessed as its agents outside and guardians within. Tiger Roar had more Esra than any other guild, each one impossibly strong, and that was how they absorbed surrounding guilds with ease. His father's guild, loved by the locals, had never cleared a tower and remained the only guild without an Esra, which made things especially difficult. He muttered it sounded like a rough situation, then teased that if the Union Guild was so beloved, why did they act like Yakuza, to which she admitted with a shrug that it was simply her personal taste. He chose not to press, and she laughed warmly, saying what truly mattered was how lively everyone remained. With a playful push, she urged him to go take a bath, adding that if he wanted his back washed, he only had to say so. He replied he could manage alone, and she smirked, remarking that he had really grown up. Standing in the bathroom afterward, he closed his eyes, admitting to himself that he had not expected things to be this serious, and could not shake his worry about his father. Opening the window, he leapt outside into the night, unaware that his mother, watching from another window, sighed softly to herself, remarking that she had just told him to rest and that children truly were a handful. Sakuya, Sura's father, made his way toward the Tiger Roar Guild alongside a member of the Allied Guild, while Sura stood atop a building, noting that the darkness outside the central area actually worked in his favor, making it easier to shoot. His focus wavered as his vision blurred, and though he tried to watch his father and the others, the view slipped away, forcing him to rub his eyes while muttering that ever since being enhanced by the fragment of the abyss, he had not even caught a cold. Suddenly a voice echoed, calling him Abyss Seed and declaring he would not escape. He spun around, unable to sense its presence, realizing with unease that the figure was indeed inside the sixth shelter. A heavy dizziness struck again as the voice repeated that his soul was marked, and Sura ground his teeth, convinced the man was right beside him, yet his attempts to catch him proved illusions. The chant of Abyss Seed droned over and over, making him realize this was soul marking. A sudden flash from below cut through as someone yelled at him for being out so late and told him to come down, and though he cursed the unwanted attention, he leapt away, ignoring the voice that urged him to wait. Landing on the ground, he found the man's presence looming again, the same words ringing in his ears, and he guessed it might be tied to the light. Testing his theory, he stood beneath a street lamp, only to find nothing happened, and soon pieced it together. After 7 seconds in darkness, the marking triggered, hitting him with dizziness, and if he panicked, the patterns warped. The voice echoed once more, but this time he laughed along with it, noting he alone could see the figure's face. A passing woman glanced at him, muttering if he was just some kid lost in delusions, while he pressed on with his thoughts, realizing that whenever he stepped under light, a screeching rang in his head until the mark eventually faded away. It explained why he had not felt symptoms earlier, since both sunlight and house lamps had kept them at bay. Still, he knew the man could track him and strike at any time, so lowering his guard was not an option. Yet above all else, he resolved, he needed to find his father and the others first. The voice returned, drilling into Sura's head until he snapped and shouted while stumbling down the street, drawing wary stares from the woman trailing behind. Moving along the roadside, he muttered to himself that just as he expected, the figure never appeared where there was light. His thoughts drifted bitterly. His mother was right. The military no longer had use for the Allied Guild, meaning his father and the others were in danger. He had no idea how many capable fighters waited in the shelter, but there was no chance the army, now siding with Tiger Roar, would stay quiet. If they were trying to corner the guild again, so be it. He vowed to protect his father and mother, even if it meant killing them all. A pang struck him as he wondered if their peaceful days were truly over. His steps halted at a large gathering ahead, realizing this was the place. He remembered his father's words, when tensions rise, fighting must remain a last resort, only chosen when no other option exists. He believed his father would still avoid battle if possible, but before the thought finished, a commotion rose behind him. A man shouted for people to move aside, declaring it was beginning. Sura turned just in time to see a sword blazing in Sakuya's hands, the light so fierce it startled the crowd. Someone gasped, saying it had been ages since their boss unsheathed that blade, recalling how last time he carved a scar 20 meters long into his enemy. The blade pulsed with violent energy as Sakuya's eyes glowed crimson, and with a commanding cry of Teisuchida, he swung down. A massive slash tore through the air, triggering a roaring blast followed by a shockwave that rattled the square. Cheers erupted, but Sura stood frozen, his breath caught, unable to comprehend what he was witnessing. Sakuya's slash ripped into the building, leaving a crack stretching from its roof all the way to the base, and the crowd stood in awe at the sight. Sura turned to a man nearby, asking if the boss had always been like this, and the man replied that Sakuya was known for being quick to fight. Confused, Sura pressed, saying he remembered something about violence being the last resort, and the man explained that in the early days he did speak that way, back when they still believed the military would handle matters. But in time it became clear that to the army, hunters were no different from ordinary citizens. So long as they did not die of sickness, they were left to fend off small battles on their own. To fix problems quickly, fists were more reliable. If victory could be gained through strength, then no need to waste words. But if defeat was certain, words were useless anyway. Best to settle it in a single blow, then talk. Sura thought back on the monk he had met, realizing the man had not seemed to seek conflict, and doubt gnawed at him. Was his understanding wrong? If one carried the kind of power his father wielded, could one rampage freely and still be forgiven? Or was it something else? His memory flashed with the monk's face, and high above, that same monk, Shuzinji Yukio, a level 75 fighter or beyond, stood on the rooftop, both eyes glowing as his aura awakened. Staring down at the carnage, at a massive beast lying in defeat, Yukio noted how a level 90 boss had fallen as though torn apart, without a trace of burns or weapon scars. It chilled him to realize such terrifying strength still existed. At the front, Sakuya and his team stood firm, but from another building a man emerged with his own group, shouting furiously if Sakuya still believed things were as they were when the refuge was first built. Sakuya smirked, saying that indeed things had changed, since irritating pests like him had appeared, and he should have killed him back then. The man taunted him to do it now, mocking that perhaps fear had finally caught him. Sakuya bristled, eyes narrowing as he snapped that he would not ignore such words, raising his sword as electric current crackled down its length. The man clenched his teeth, thinking he had provoked enough, calling out for more to emerge, demanding if this was still not enough. He roared one last insult, spitting that a coward too afraid to draw his blade was only fit to become food for Tiger Roar. Hearing the provocation, Sakuya leapt high with his sword, but the men of Tiger Roar surged forward, one raising a shield that blocked his strike. Another voice rang out, mocking that he had guts to fight inside the refuge. The speaker was Shirai Osamu, a level 63 assassin, and the crowd gasped at his presence, some shouting in shock, wondering why he was siding with Tiger Roar. Watching, Sura's thoughts raced. Was Osamu secretly the soldier backing Tiger Roar? His presence here could not be mere coincidence, especially with so many people gathered in the building. Osamu stepped forward, reciting from the refuge's temporary security ordinance, Article 15, that personal duels were forbidden within the refuge, and violators faced no less than 15 days of imprisonment, or even death. He asked if Sakuya would comply. Sakuya frowned, realizing the trap, provoke him into striking, then accuse him of violating the law to have him imprisoned. Once inside, they could extend his sentence indefinitely or arrange an accident to eliminate him, and with him gone, the aligned guild would be crushed instantly by Tiger Roar and others. What puzzled him was why the military higher-ups themselves would want to destabilize the factions, though he knew he could not afford to admit guilt. He replied firmly that Osamu was mistaken, insisting he and Mukashima had never dueled, and as a supporter of the aligned guild, he would not accept guilt without proof. Osamu smirked, pointing at the deep blade mark as clear evidence. Sakuya countered that such a mark was only proof of trying to renovate the building, not of a duel. Osamu's voice hardened as he declared it was not for Sakuya to decide. If he said it was evidence of a duel, then so it was. The moment Sakuya stepped inside, he had already lost. From the building's windows, squads of guards suddenly appeared, rifles raised, and Osamu gave the order coldly, surrender at once. Everyone froze in shock as countless guards poured out from the building, rifles raised, and one of the guild members shouted that if the enemy wanted to fight, they should meet the challenge head-on. Sakuya stopped them sharply, warning that the soldiers had range advantage and would not hesitate, though he believed they would not fire just yet. Osamu laughed at his restraint, while Sakuya weighed his options, knowing the level 63 assassin was too swift to pin down. He considered that if he could seize Tsukida as a hostage, he might break through. Drawing his blade, he lunged, but Tsukida raised his sword shield with resolve, determined not to become the weak link. He reminded himself that a defender's skill could read attacks more precisely than most classes, and at this distance, he could block completely. Sword shields were designed to counter blades, and against swords they performed beyond their level, able even to withstand the full strike of a level 69 warrior. Compared to that, a level 65 samurai's blade could never break through. Sakuya's strike clashed against the shield with a heavy clang, and Tsukida cried out for him to give up. Osamu pressed coldly, asking if he would surrender willingly or be dragged into prison with his comrades, urging him to choose wisely. One of Sakuya's men pleaded desperately, and Sakuya, teeth clenched in frustration, slowly lowered his sword. Osamu smirked, praising the wise decision. The guild members, however, shouted angrily that the enemy was mocking them and insisted the last strike had only been a buff, while the boss had merely acted to protect them. Among them, Vice Captain Jiru understood the true signal. Raising the sword meant to ready for battle, but releasing it was their hidden order to attack, a technique their foes knew nothing about. The guild members suddenly flared with energy as if preparing for something immense, leaving the opposing side unsettled and whispering in confusion. In an instant, Sakuya's blade seemed to vanish, and Tsuchida stared in disbelief, unsure how to react as the entire squad leapt toward him. Convinced his shield could withstand any sword strike, he braced himself with confidence, recalling it could even repel a level 69 warrior's blow. But the moment Jiro extended his hand, a burst of raw energy erupted like a hammer rather than a blade, shattering the shield Tsuchida had trusted completely. Stunned, he realized it was no sword technique but a devastating strike of another kind, and Sakuya followed up relentlessly, pounding him into the ground with full force. Just as Sakuya pushed forward to finish it, Osamu slipped in behind, daggers flashing, declaring he knew the samurai's aim and that such obsession only meant immediate execution. Before he could strike, Jiro's voice rang out and a defensive spell burst forth, blocking the assassin's attack. Osamu snarled through clenched teeth as Tsuchida shouted to kill them, prompting the guards to open fire in unison. Jiro expanded his hands, unleashing a barrier that absorbed the storm of bullets, while Sakuya readied himself to pin Takeda down. Yet just as he moved to land the blow, Tsuchida vanished, leaving only Osamu's bitter words that a subordinate's stone prison had trapped him in shadows, and the destruction of the shield had triggered the activation condition of the assassin's kill shadow train. He sneered that with the hostage gone, Sakuya's defeat was sealed, and raised his hand to finish them. At that exact moment, something entirely unexpected broke the flow. Sura appeared behind Tsuchida and Osamu, casually asking why they looked so shocked. Osamu's thoughts raced, mistaking him for a hidden ally summoned by Mukashima, an enemy who had slipped behind them to strike an assassin where he was weakest. Instinctively, his hand shot to a vial at his side, while Tsuchida's mind reeled in horror, realizing the deadly poison prepared to bring down even a level 90 boss had somehow already been stolen without him noticing. Osamu suddenly hurled his dagger, stunning everyone as a thick purple mist began to spread through the air. The guards stumbled into the haze, choking before they could even take another breath, collapsing one after another as the poison consumed them. Tsuchida quickly covered his mouth, grimacing at the stench and thinking he disliked resorting to such means, yet with this, Mukashima's comrades would surely perish. The fumes coiled through the battlefield like a living thing, searing throats and lungs, leaving bodies crumpled in silence. But as he watched, a sense of dread crept in. Sakuya was still moving unfazed within the cloud. Alarm surged through Tsuchida's mind, for this poison was strong enough to paralyze even a level 90 boss, and yet the samurai pushed forward undeterred. Could it be, he thought in disbelief, that the one standing before him was not human at all but a monster? Sora clenches a dagger between his teeth before spitting it forward with deadly precision, his words sharp as he asks where they think they are going. In a sudden burst of strength, he seizes both Osamu and Tsuchida in his grip, their teeth grinding as they struggle. He calmly reminds them that no matter the role, every player is bound by 5 stats: intelligence, perception, strength, agility, and constitution. Tsuchida's mind races, realizing if Sora can withstand the poison, his constitution must rival that of a level 100 player. Sora orders them to command their men to lower their weapons, but Osamu grits his teeth and unleashes Shadow Spear, twisting Sora's arm with a swift rotation before flipping onto his shoulder, locking down his movement. Seeing this, Tsuchida smirks, convinced this is their opening while Sora is pinned. Yet in the next instant, Sora appears, his blade flashing as a gust tears through the air, blasting both Osamu and Tsuchida into the wall with bone-cracking force. Even Sakuya watches, briefly stunned by the display. From behind, Osamu lunges again, banking on his shadow trance to strike unnoticed, his dagger stabbing into Sora's back. But his eyes widen as the blade refuses to pierce, grinding uselessly against a body harder than steel. Sora turns, his fist slamming into Osamu's face, sending him flying with blood spraying from his nose. Dazed, Osamu realizes he was nearly broken by that single gust and tells himself he must retreat, but before the thought can solidify, Sora closes the distance. His hand clamps Osamu's head and smashes it into the ground with brutal speed, leaving the assassin helpless and pinned. The sight stuns everyone present, even Sakuya, who steps forward with a hint of awe as Sora drags Osamu by the coat, his presence overwhelming the battlefield. At the Makujima residency, the hall falls quiet as the mother softly asks if it is finally over, and the father steps in from behind, assuring her that it is. Jiro presses if they confessed anything, but Sakuya, seated with a weary look, replies that their lips stayed sealed, though at least now they know where Tiger Roar stands and must remain cautious for the next few days, setting that plan aside for now. Turning to Sura, he asks what he endured these past 5 years, and Sura recounts how after witnessing their conflict, he realized his own mistakes, recalling how he had fallen into a strange realm half a decade ago, trapped in a tower where he spent years battling endless monsters, until finally a summoner cast him back into this world. Sakuya frowns, noting there are 60 towers in existence yet none match his story, but Sura insists it must have been an uncharted one. Zero suggests that if there are towers near Shelter 6, they should prioritize clearing them, but Sakuya brushes it aside, saying what matters most is that Sura is alive. Zero laughs, claiming alive is an understatement, since he has returned countless times stronger than any of them, and the mother gently adds that nothing else matters as long as he is home. Sakuya vows their family will never be torn apart again, but just then the lights flicker out and Sura staggers, dizziness washing over him. Sakuya wonders if it is only a blackout, while Jiro recalls the forecast of heavy rain and storms, yet Sakuya points out no thunder has been heard. In that tense silence, a shadowy figure begins to form behind Sura, and his mind races as he senses danger, while the man's voice drifts through the darkness, promising he will never let him escape this time. As night deepens and the town lies in complete darkness, an unsettling presence begins to seep out from Sura's body, making him tense as he curses under his breath, realizing it has returned, though its words sound different this time. He wonders if the power has flared up again, leaving even his parents unable to protect anyone, and questions whether the entity vanished or merely left his body in displeasure. A chilling voice echoes, claiming it has not been seen for a long while, and Sura, unnerved, tries convincing himself it is only a hallucination he will deal with later. But the entity taunts him, asking if he still believes that, before placing both hands over his eyes. When it withdraws, his irises turn pitch black, as though swallowed by a curse. Panic ripples through the hall as his parents and Jiro tense, the mother quickly assuming it is a curse and moving to purify him, only for a screen to flash before them stating he is not afflicted by one. Realizing the being has taken a physical form, Sura feels dread settle in, knowing this is no illusion and fearing for the lives of his family and everyone around him, just as the scene shifts to what comes next. Sura rushes forward and seizes the entity with his hand, glaring as the dark figure asks mockingly if he is afraid. His father shouts into the void, admitting he cannot see any enemy, and the mother too says nothing is visible, while Sura growls at the unseen figure, demanding why it keeps chasing him. The entity chuckles, calling him mistaken, then introduces itself as Fadaru, a dark god of the noble Asa god tribe, and explains that within the abyss Sura absorbed the black crystal, a fragment of its own divine power. Because he selfishly escaped from there, he is now hunted by the agents of God, who are gathering as they speak, and warns that if he wishes to live, he must return to the tower with it. Hearing this, Sura wonders if the agents it mentions are the Azra his mother once spoke of. His father grips his sword tightly, ready to strike though unsure of the situation, but his mother urges patience. Sura scoffs, asking if it truly claims to have beaten Ashinmai, which provokes anger from the entity as he squeezes its neck tighter, questioning whether even several Azra together could accomplish much. Fadaro snarls not to grow arrogant, reminding him that after Ragnarok the divine power of the Asa tribe faded and that his current strength is nothing compared to other Azra, insisting it could strip him of power at will. Sura challenges on what basis he should trust such words, only for the entity to laugh coldly, calling him a foolish mortal and warning that disbelief will lead to regret when a rain of blood engulfs the land. Sura falls silent, mind clouded by doubt, torn between rejecting the threat outright and the gnawing thought that if there is truth in its words, he may be standing at the edge of something far worse. Sura tightens his grip on the entity's neck and with a snap of his fingers summons a swirling tornado of energy, the air erupting in a storm of yellow and orange electricity. Though his vision had been clouded by the entity's smoke, his eyes clear and he realizes his sight has returned. He unleashes the gathered energy through his hand, blasting the entity backward. Watching this, his father mutters that he believes him, and Sura quickly recognizes a figure stepping through the door as the monk he had seen at the town entrance. Calling him out, he is surprised when his father says the man is more than an acquaintance, for he is the one with whom he once began a guild. The entity writhes and curses at the monk to release it, yet it becomes clear the monk is somehow restraining its power. Sura asks if he can actually see the being, and the monk calmly instructs him to remove the blindfold, saying they must talk as this is an emergency. When his father demands to know what is happening, the monk replies he will explain only after speaking with his son. Moments later, inside the room, The entity remains bound while Sura and the monk sit opposite one another. Sura presses him about the emergency, and the monk explains he is not an Asura, but his insight allows him to perceive divine power. It is for this reason he was able to use a forbidden divine art to seal both the king and the power within Sura. He warns that the force Sura carries far exceeds Shinmai's strength, though how he obtained it remains unclear, and there is no time to search for answers. Several formidable divine presences have already gathered in the town, most likely hunting for Sura's power, and though he cannot explain what befell Shinmai, he confirms that what Fatara said is true. The monk continues firmly, warning Sura never to return to the abyss, for within the tower dwell beings far more dangerous than Asura Isudara. He explains that Fataru is only trying to deceive him and drag him back to reclaim the divine power he carries. What Sura must do now, he insists, is leave this place at once and join the army. Sura frowns, recalling the very soldier who once tried to kill him with a bomb, and questions if that is truly safe. The monk chuckles, admitting the army is indeed like that at present, but assures him there is one individual he can place his trust in. He adds that the Asura maintain a cooperative relationship with the army, meaning they will not dare to harm him. Sura challenges this, pointing out that since Fadaro and even his own father were Asura, there is no guarantee they will stay out of his affairs, despite any supposed rules. The monk calmly reassures him, saying there exists an unspoken law among the Asura not to recklessly harm civilians, which is precisely why the Hunter Federation continues to exist. More importantly, he declares that as long as he remains at Sura's side, no Asura would dare interfere, for their Rakan stands as a force equal to the Asura themselves. At the Allied Guild, the monk concluded his words, telling Sura that was all for now and instructing him to meet Tonosaki from the command, an acquaintance who would surely protect him. He also urged him to check on the curse practitioners, warning that if war broke out and a curse formation was set, even Tiger Roar would be unable to interfere, assuring him the alliance had its reasons for staying put. About 15 minutes later, the monk sat outside sensing a hostile presence when the doors burst open and 4 figures appeared, unleashing black energy straight at him. He quickly summoned a golden bell barrier and dodged the attack, recognizing them as Tiger Roar members, which made everyone tense. At their head stood Mukai himself, a sight that made the monk frown. Mukai called out to Yukinaju, and when the monk responded, dark energy swirled from Mukai's fingers, forming a tornado that filled the temple air with writhing black souls clinging to those nearby. Alarm spread as Sakuya realized the Oni soul had locked onto the position of the alliance, even infiltrating the shelf units, making escape impossible. Activating his search eye, he confirmed the enemy's levels were overwhelming. The monk calmly asked why they had come so late, but Mukai's men dismissed his words, with their leader demanding to know where Sura was. Feigning ignorance, the monk replied he had no idea, prompting Hiro to snarl and insult him, vowing to kill him on the spot. The monk coolly remarked that his opponent seemed poorly educated, which only fueled Hiro's fury as he charged. Inside, Sura's mother sat on the ground within a completed spell circle and ordered a barrier to open, surrounding everyone with a protective green field. She explained it was the curse of weakness caused by Mukishima Yai. Hiro sneered at the spell, boasting he alone could crush the alliance even if cursed, and lunged at the monk. Yet when his fist met the monk's hand, the monk easily blocked him, remarking that he clearly misunderstood the alliance. Hiro then shouted in shock, realizing his level had dropped by 30 and that he was cursed. The monk calmly told him that level reduction was not such a big matter before effortlessly flinging him back into the wall with a single push. Those watching were left impressed by his strength, while Sakuya explained that anyone entering the cursed area had their levels halved, though even a caster at level 34 could still stand and fight. The chief laughed, declaring that things were finally getting interesting, and from behind, a girl stepped forward with a quiet yes as she raised her hand, releasing transparent streams of electricity that surged like waves, giving the impression of leveling up everyone caught in its flow. The man then proclaimed that as long as they remained within his grasp, Mukishima's sorrow would inevitably return, and his laughter rang out as the overwhelming power began pressing down even on Sakuya and the monk. A sudden screen then appeared before them, announcing their entry into Athena's arena, and in an instant, they were all transported inside. The monk frowned, admitting this was bad, while the man only grinned wider, saying it had been too long since he faced an equal opponent and that his heart was pounding with excitement, finding it far from boring to wait for Mukishima to walk into such a trap. His eyes glowed red as he turned, calling himself the noisiness, though though his words were abruptly cut short when another figure asked what he had just done to them. The boss then raised a crimson shining spear, his grin sharp as he declared he might as well eliminate them too. The ground trembles as buildings crumble, and from above a lone figure descends, Sora. Her arrival stuns those present, and a woman observing from the side murmurs that this must be Tanasaki. Raising his hand, Sora declares that he has come on behalf of the Union to seek military protection, and at his words, the girl orders the guards to lower their weapons before asking if he is truly Mukashima Sora, saying there is something she wishes to know. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a thunderous voice echoes as a man slams his weapon into the earth, flames erupting in response. A woman raises her voice in prayer, calling upon God to bear witness to her fight, then cries out for a miracle to guide this duel, and above them, a massive angel manifests in the sky. Tension grips everyone as the woman announces that each side must present 5 warriors, with the first to secure 3 victories gaining the blessing of Olympus, while the losers will be burned alive by divine light. Shock runs through the group, and Sakuya mutters that with only 8 of them present, how are they supposed to find 5 fighters? The girl reassures that their main combatant is still on the way, and Hiro steps forward with a mocking tone, asking who wishes to die first. As a notification flashes, Hiro has issued a challenge. Sakuya grits his teeth, but the monk steps ahead, admitting this happened because of his poor judgment. Sakuya tells him not to blame himself, insisting that his presence alone is enough. Yuwa adds that with curses weakening the enemy's level in single combat, they stand a chance, and Jiro agrees, saying that since their older sister is unsuited for battle, all they need is to secure 3 wins. Then, stepping closer, Sakuya places a firm hand on the monk's shoulder. Monk spoke firmly, saying Eris Azura was known as the fiercest, once using his unmatched skill to crush guilds that even had 3 Azuras. But he claimed to have a strategy, and told them to leave the first fight to him. Stepping into a transparent dome, his body faintly glowing, he smirked and requested a bout. His opponent Hiro clenched his jaw, one eye glowing red with fury, as the angel hovering above declared both sides to take position and announced the start. Red fumes poured from Hiro as he dashed forward, leaping high and shouting that enough talk had been wasted. He swung down with his fist, but Monk slipped past, only for Hiro to twist his arm back, aiming for Monk's chin. Back and forth their clash filled the dome, every move closely watched outside. Hiro roared if running was all his opponent could do, while Monk stayed silent, evading every strike. Then, in a sudden shift, he caught Hiro's arm, and outside Sakuya clenched his fist in excitement, cheering. The atmosphere inside warped as Hiro's rage spiked, but Monk held firm, seizing his chance. His free hand struck Hiro's chest with force, sending him flying back. Hiro crashed but steadied himself, digging into the ground to halt. His allies muttered that Monk had taken initiative, and then kept distance, wary of what came next. The girl warned that Hiro's offense wasn't so forgiving, while Sakuya called out to Monk in concern. Hiro, smirking with a devilish air, stretched out his hand as a sharp weapon-like fang sprouted from his palm, and with a chilling tone he asked how they liked the fang of Kedmos. Long pondered that Cadmos, Eris's pet serpent, once fused with Azura to perfectly match his close-range assaults. Now before them, Hiro's body warped, fangs jutting outward as red, lava-like energy pulsed through the cracks of his flesh. With a dark grin he growled that this was only the beginning, then hurled himself toward Monk with crushing force, shouting that Catmos still wasn't satisfied, his burning eyes brimming with unrestrained fury. Hiro lunges at Monk, fist driving forward with crushing force, but Monk narrowly slips aside, teeth clenched as he braces. The strike shifts midair, twisting into a dragon's maw that sinks into Monk's arm, its fangs digging deep. Gritting hard, he resists, realizing Hiro's speed has surged. Then a sudden gleam flickers in his eyes. Yellow energy bursts from his hand, surging into the beast and shattering its form, forcing Hiro back. Catching his breath, Monk mutters inwardly that it isn't Hiro who has grown faster, it's him who has slowed. A message flickers across the screen, dragon poison inflicted, venom coursing through him, and dizziness begins to cloud his focus. Hiro laughs, twisting his wrist, mocking how resilient his foe is. Another message appears. Venomous dragon restores stamina by consuming blood, and the beast coils back into Hiro's body, fueling his strength. Cracking his shoulder with a smirk, Hiro taunts if that was the extent of his resistance. Outside the dome, Sukeo worries aloud that prolonging the clash will only widen the gap, asking if Shujinji can hold on. He activates his search eye, straining to glimpse the flow of the battle. Hero rushes in, his kick aimed sharp, but Monk blocks with both arms, the impact reverberating through him. With venom spreading further, Hero laughs darkly, shouting for him to feel the dragon's poison tearing through every vein and daring him to endure. His fists rain down in relentless succession, each strike hammering forward, while Monk weaves between the blows, his breathing growing heavier with every dodge. Monk clasps his hands together, voice steady as he begins chanting, but Hero snarls that no sutra will save him now. From the sidelines, a girl blinks in disbelief, sensing divine power gathering around him, while another remarks that it is neither Azura nor anything familiar, questioning its source. Hero leaps high, ready to strike, yet a radiant force swirls protectively around Monk as his chants deepen. Outside the dome, Tsukeo brightens, realizing this could be a dangerous but decisive technique, a chance that might turn the battle. Golden light erupts from Monk's hands, his eyes glowing the same hue as he invokes the Diamond Realm, honoring all Buddhas. A colossal Buddha form materializes, leaving Hero momentarily unsettled before scoffing that no god will stop him. Rising into the air, Monk confronts him head-on, armored in divine radiance. Hero sneers at the audacity, recalling a past fool who thought condensed divine power could resist Katamose, only to become its nourishment. With cruel confidence, he vows to devour Monk the same way. But his arrogance shatters when Monk's fist smashes into his face, blood spraying as Hero is hurled back into the ground. Shocked, he reels at how the poison was suppressed by divine energy, Monk's speed restored. Without pause, Monk drives a crushing kick into his abdomen, sending another jolt of pain tearing through him. Hero spits blood, realizing it is not only speed but power and reflexes that have been enhanced, yet to Katamo this makes Monk the perfect feast. He unleashes Katamo's dragon toward him, declaring he will become nourishment, and tension flickers across Monk's face as the beast clamps onto his arm. Hero bursts into laughter, convinced of victory, but suddenly a force strikes his abdomen, leaving him dazed. Golden fumes spill from his mouth, his eyes flaring red as he panics over losing control of divine power. Monk smirks, warning him not to celebrate too soon, then smashes his fist into the dragon's maw, stating that Arhat's power is too heavy to digest. With another crushing blow to Hero's mouth, Hero screams in denial, insisting Katamo cannot fail to consume divine power. Monk dismisses him as naive and channels a final attack that hurls Hero far into the distance. Watching from outside, the girl recalls his decision to turn to Arhat, puzzled by the choice since becoming Arhat means never becoming Azura and instead wielding Karma Force. She explains that Karma Force is overwhelming and nearly impossible to manage without constant virtue, for without it, the Force devours its host instantly. Yet Monk bears that immense burden, his body struggling even to move. Their Monk steps closer to Hero, remarking that Hero's endless misdeeds have left him devoid of virtue, making it impossible for him to master her Karma Force. Overjoyed, Hero embraces the girl, exclaiming that he had promised Monk would prevail. One of the opposing women mutters in disbelief that such a loathsome job exists, while another warns grimly that it is far too early to rejoice, cautioning them not to think victory can be secured by cheap tricks and never to underestimate Azura. But Hero refuses to fall, forcing himself upright as the dragon roars behind him, and he taunts that Monk lacks the divine power to keep his form alive. The fumes rising from his blood turn poisonous, forcing Monk to cover his mouth as he realizes the dragon's blood itself carries venom. The arena fills with the suffocating haze while Hero grips a lightning spear, a tornado of sorrowful blood spiraling around him. His eyes flare crimson as he vows to keep fighting until his body rots away. Watching, the girl notes that even an Azura needs sacrifice to wield a divine weapon, their strength borrowed from the gods and shaped to fit their style. One of the men points out the unbridgeable gulf between normal players and Azura, and the girl reflects that though Shijinji has fallen, Hero is offering the poisoned dragon bestowed by Urusu, an act so reckless it could anger the gods themselves. Yet she hopes that merciful Urusu might forgive them if victory is claimed, though defeat would bring punishment beyond imagination. Still, she insists, no normal fighter could triumph over an Azura armed with a divine weapon. In the arena, Hero brandishes the lightning fang and hurls himself at Monk. Panic sparks in Monk at the thought of another brutal close-range clash, but his eyes widen when the spear vanishes, seemingly absorbed into Hero's body. With a devastating punch, Hero smashes into Monk and sends him flying across the arena. Hero slashes a cut across Monk's face and snarls explode, triggering a violent blast right behind him. Monk curses under his breath, realizing the danger, but his enchanted robe absorbs the brunt of it. Yet the system screen flashes, showing the corrosive effect of Arusa's blood has halved the robe's defenses. Monk clenches his jaw, thinking his equipment is being destroyed piece by piece, just as Hiro charges again with a fist aimed straight at him. This time Monk slips aside, only to see 3 poisoned blood arrows shoot from Hiro's body. His eyes narrow, realizing the opponent can strike with more than just fists. Hiro growls for him to dodge if he can, then unleashes a storm of punches without pause. Monk panics, unable to read the rhythm of his moves, every strike eating away at his equipment. Bound by karma, his outfit strains under the corrosive assault, leaving him convinced that at this rate he's already dead. Gritting his teeth, Monk keeps dodging and shoves himself back to gain distance, chanting, "May the 3 realms be purified, may factions clash, may our deepest sins be erased," thrusting his palm outward. Hiro sneers that retreat will not save him and spreads blood-poisoned strings from his hand across the ground, but Monk utters silent lower realm curse. Hiro's eyes widen as the curse manifests above, coiling into a tornado of sacred energy that pins him to the ground with crushing force. The screen appears, declaring silent lower realm curse, a holy incarnation that purifies and expels evil, weakening the corrupt dragon blood flowing within him. Hiro roars a sealing spell, aiming to lock Monk's movements, then hurls a mass of blood down at him. Sakaya, watching from the side, panics and shouts that Monk is in danger, just as the strike grazes past Monk's head. Monk exhales sharply, realizing he barely dodged death. Sakaya, overcome with worry, rushes forward toward the dome, but the angel guarding it warns that any who interfere in the duel shall be punished. Hearing this, Monk snaps back to his senses, collapsing onto the ground and shouting in frustration. The girl behind him tries to calm him, but above, the screen declares divine flame punishment, life force reduced by 15. Hiro smirks, saying without interruptions Monk would already be dead. Monk thinks grimly that Hiro fights with brutal force up close while also using blood arrows from afar, making him a relentless opponent. He judges he can only last 3 more minutes and accepts he has no choice. Closing his eyes and pressing his palms together, he steadies himself. Hiro scoffs, calling it a waste and declaring victory as he stretches out his hand, but Monk remains still, thinking through every method recorded. His thoughts linger on the ranks of an Arhat, bravely eyes, wise eyes, Dharma eyes, and Buddha eyes. He knows he holds the wise eyes, but to prevail he must reach beyond, to awaken the Dharma eyes. With resolve burning, he opens his eyes, and before all, the Dharma eyes awaken. The manga radiates with a strange Dharma sign as Monk steadies himself, realizing the effect grants him heightened speed but only for a short while, so he must find an opening quickly. He notes the spear lacks the divine energy of the earlier blood arrow, yet as he thinks, Hiro charges forward and hurls another arrow. This time it halts before Monk, who shapes it into a shield against the side strikes, holding firmly as Hiro presses harder. Frustration rises in Hiro, wondering how Monk peers through his technique, but Monk calmly remarks that this blood spear is not much of a threat, and with a flick, it shatters into fragments. Hiro shouts in disbelief as gasps echo around. One voice cries out in shock at how he blocked the needle-thin attack, while the girl marvels that those eyes seem to perceive everything. Sakuya beams with joy, shouting that there's finally a countermeasure against Azura. Monk answers that with so much evil energy gathered, darkness and wicked thoughts will surface, but he will cleanse it all. He begins casting purification, and blood around him starts to purify. Hiro snarls that even if Monk can see through his strikes, divine blood cannot be countered so easily, since its thin threads can pierce through any defense. The woman observing notes the divine power in the blood is uneven, making it even more dangerous, and questions how Monk can endure. The blood swirls around, rising like countless thin needles closing in, and Hiro declares there is no escape. Yet through his Dharma eyes, Monk perceives every thread and unleashes an immense lightning strike that crashes down with overwhelming force, shaking Hiro to his core. Monk's voice echoes that all beings are blinded by ignorance, bound by attachments, sinking into evil paths, and drowning in endless suffering. The woman watching warns the others to beware, for with those eyes he sees the flow of divine power, making all attacks meaningless. Hiro, stunned, glances at her and accuses her of planning to interfere. The angel-like figure wavers, uncertain, before pointing at another woman and issuing a stern warning. Hiro protests angrily, claiming their boss received punishment yet she only gets a warning, but Sakuya restrains him, insisting they should first witness Monk's victory. Inside the dome, Monk towers over Hero as a vast spell radiates above, pressing down with immense force until Hero struggles even to stand, gritting his teeth and muttering he needs no help. Monk's presence surges further as he activates the sutra, and behind him, an ethereal figure manifests, its aura shaking the dome. Hero stares in disbelief, shouting about the sutra, while Monk calmly explains that when this scripture is chanted, it appears to remove obstacles and bring peace, and though it is the very first sutra monks learn, it is far from weak. By embodying Fujo Moyo, his attack and defense more than double, but the sutra requires 30 seconds of unwavering focus, making its recital before an enemy the greatest humiliation. Snarling, Hero slashes his own body, sending streams of blood whipping toward Monk, as Shindizagar remarks that disrupting the sutra demands breaking its seal, though forcing it requires an immense amount of divine power. Monk, unshaken, thinks that surprise assaults are meaningless against the Dharma eyes, and dodges each streak of blood with calm precision. Furious, Hero curses that 15 seconds remain, his bloodshot eyes burning with rage as he notes crimson dripping from Monk's own eyes, believing he must be nearing his limit, yet Monk's focus remains unbroken. The countdown begins from outside as the girl raises her voice, tension filling the dome, while behind Monk the gathering energy swells into a terrifying wave. In desperation, Hero howls that he cannot even disturb his opponent's focus, but by then the sutra reaches its climax. Monk declares that the merit of this scripture is like oil to the burning eyes, like water to the heart, and everything flows by the mind as ordained by the divine. The final surge erupts, blasting Hero off his feet and hurling him across the ground with devastating force. Monk sighs in relief, thinking he managed to end the fight before the Dharma eyes reach their limit. The angel overhead proclaims victory for the allied guild in the first battle, and as the dome dissolves, cheers erupt all around. Surrounded by the voices of triumph, Monk smiles brightly, overcome with happiness at the hard-won victory. The guild member rushed to Hero's side and tried to heal him, but Hero stood stiff with rage and disappointment, while the girl beside him urged him to at least give his best. Behind him, two angel-like figures appeared, their voices cold and sharp. One mocked that Athena's hypocrisy tainted the arena, the other spat that losing here was disgraceful. Hero faltered, muttering an apology, but then snapped, shouting at them to stay silent. One angel delivered a message saying their father was disappointed, while the other raised a whip, declaring Hero should feel honored to be executed by him. His partner intervened, insisting he wanted the right to cut down Demicles himself, then lashed Hero's back over and over until blood spilled from his mouth. Watching in outrage, Sakaya demanded how they could treat one of their own Azura this way, but the angel replied it was their father's final mercy before leaving Hero broken. Barely able to move, Hero groaned Shago's name, swearing he would kill him next time, only for a woman to mock that there would be no next time, since he was doomed to burn in Hera's eternal flames. Nearby, a man gripped his weapon, purple energy swirling around him as his anger flared. Sakaya stepped forward, telling him to leave it to him, and his wife reminded him that the death god Azura's ability tied to the spirit would surely prove useful. Accepting a charm she pressed into his hand, a notification appeared stating an item from Mukushima Yui had been placed in his box. From behind, Monk and Hero wished him good luck, and Sakaya answered with resolve before stepping into the arena to face the man. As he advanced, his thoughts sharpened. Samurai possess a short aura that exerts pressure even from afar, yet it demands considerable strain, so in duels, close-range combat is best. The method is simple: close the gap with Shuinpa, follow with Rinzin to seal off counterattacks, then strike the weak point in one decisive blow. Straightforward, but perhaps the most effective style, though if that failed, he knew the fight would become far more difficult. The female hovering above commanded both fighters to take their positions and declared the combat begun. The man immediately unleashed a storm of black-purple dark energy towards Sakaya. He thought to slip through it with Shuinpa, dodging every strike while observing the man's movements. The man sneered, mocking him as a one-trick samurai. Sakaya lunged and slashed, cutting what appeared to be the man's body in half, but it was only a shadow. Realizing his mistake, he tensed as the purple energy surged toward him, forming a spinning tornado. He sliced through it and charged again, only to cut another shadow, liquid-like this time. The man laughed, taunting that attacks couldn't harm shadows without physical form and that vengeful spirits were endless. Frustration burned in Sakaya as each strike missed, the man claiming a samurai who couldn't recognize his foe was worthless. Anger and determination surged in him, his sword, aura, and eyes glowed intensely. The man tried to prevent him from charging, launching repeated attacks back-to-back, forcing Sakaya to dodge and slash relentlessly. Behind the swirling dark energy, the woman observed, noting the stark difference between an Asura and a normal person. Hiro brushes it off as luck, but the female notes that becoming a guild master as a samurai is nearly impossible. She eyes Sakuya's wife, wondering why she exudes such confidence despite seeming at a disadvantage, clearly hiding something. On the battlefield, Sakuya slices through the black shadow while the man speculates about a new move. The girl warns to watch out, and Sakuya executes a leap assassination, weaving in a zigzag pattern until he lands silently behind the man, completely unnoticed. When the sixth refuge was first established, the military and players worked together to locate a monster nest. Near the refuge, they discovered a mine that became their first exploration base. Initially, only small monsters appeared, and progress was smooth, but deeper inside, everything changed. The types, numbers, and ranks of monsters grew deadly. The cave had formed a full ecosystem, and at its deepest point lurked a level 80 spider monster. Humanity stood no chance, yet Mokushima bravely lured the monster to allow everyone to escape. What happened afterward remained a mystery, but 3 days later, a pitiful scream echoed from deep within, and the cave began collapsing. Mokushima dashed through the falling rocks and returned safely, using his Hasuto eightfold leap, a terrifying technique allowing up to 8 consecutive jumps, each exponentially faster than the last. Back in the present fight, Sakaya recalled using it 3 times to escape the Revenant. Now, the 4th jump propelled him toward the man. The opponent gritted his teeth, shocked at Sakaya's accelerating speed, dodging the slashing sword and searching for him. Sakaya leapt again, the 5th jump, and swung at the man's neck, but his shadow moved above her. Observing closely, Sakaya prepared the 6th leap, cutting through every shadow and every black aura of the man, relentlessly striking as he grew increasingly exhausted, fearing the 7th jump. Sakuya thought with the power inherited from the hero, I've erased all surrounding souls. Using my speed advantage, I can strike before his spirits even form. The man leapt toward her, pushing with his weapon, and she realized exactly as she expected, if she outpaced him, his soul generation couldn't keep up. Forcing the fight into close combat, she could win. She shouted heroic legacy, and behind her, a massive spectral form resembling the mustached hero appeared. The girl watching remarked that it was no wonder Sakuya had held the guild master position so long. Even without being Izuva, that power alone was enough to face any guild. Many theories surrounded the tower's origin, the most common being it as a manifestation of humanity, history and mythology fused. If gods symbolize mythology, then heroes naturally represent history. Inheriting a hero, however, differs from being chosen by the gods. It's more a stroke of fate, a lucky encounter. The man taunted, asking if she truly thought she could win close combat, claiming a mortal's weapon could never best a reaper's scythe. Their weapons clashed, and Sakuya thought the reach and angle favored her, though handling a divine artifact was no simple task. The man spun his weapon in a 360-degree arc, and Sakuya recognized that forcing it like a normal weapon would leave a huge opening. Dodging the strike, she smirked, mocking that no god had taught him proper use, then pushed her sword into his chest, thinking she had only planned to use that skill to evade him. Juro, beaming with joy, declares they've won, but Sora's mother shakes her head, saying not yet. Shiraya laughs, mocking the look of superiority on Juro's face as ridiculous. Sakuya frowns, realizing he might have miscalculated, and wonders if Revenant Shade has no cooldown. Shiraya smirks, saying he never limited the switch to spirits, then thrusts his hand through Sakuya's body and grasps his heart. A text appears, "You have been marked by the enemy, the Hades' brand." Sakuya realizes he was caught off guard, suspecting Shiraya transformed his body into a spiritual form that ignores physical damage. Shiraya warns that if Sakuya is marked 4 times, his soul will belong to him forever, leaving no chance for escape. Sakuya notices the mark where Shiraya touched him, and a text appears, Hades' brand 1. He realizes that if the mark reaches level 4, the bearer becomes a specter of Hades. Sakuya worries that getting too close will let Shiraya mark him, but staying distant lets the specters swarm, making things tricky. His 8-fold leap is still recharging, if only he could use it now. Shiraya calls his name, acknowledging his strength, yet insists he's ultimately just an ordinary man and moves to strike. Shiraya notes that although Sakuya takes more magic damage and constantly loses mana in shadow form like his specters, physical attacks are ineffective. As Shiraya reaches to touch him, Sakuya dodges by retreating. Shiraya admits he's fast but still weak, and Sakuya lands a hit. The text appears again, Hades' brand. Sakuya realizes that if the mark reaches level 4, he will become a specter of Hades. Shiraya laughs, telling him running is useless, and warns that once he's marked 4 times, his body will rot in infernal flames, his bones cracking as they burn, and his soul will be chained, turning him into a puppet. He marks Sakuya for the 3rd time, and reminds him that a revenant shade is also present. The text updates to Hades' brand 3. Sakuya strikes, but it has no effect, and Shiraya taunts that it's useless. Sakuya suspects Shiraya is trying to drain his mana by forcing him to deactivate his shadow state, but he knows he can maintain it for 3 more minutes, though the next hit will be the 4th mark. Preparing to strike, Sakuya begins charging his sword's aura, and Shiraya wonders if it's to create an opening. Shiraya dismisses it as nonsense, uses his revenant shade technique to appear behind Sakuya, and commands him to die and become a specter. Calmly, Sakuya unshades his sword, glowing white, and attacks, but Shiraya dodges, claiming a sword's aura is still a physical attack and won't harm him. Sakuya recalls holding his wife's amulet, remembering she had told him that as a reaper, his power connects to specters. Thanks to her, he had a blank sheet soaked in holy water, dried in sunlight, and infused with divine power by a cleric. Now, at maximum strength, it allows him to command specters effectively. Dami observes that just as Shiraya had devised countermeasures against the samurai, they had prepared for this as well. Sakuya slices through the shadow clones, but Shiraya declares it useless, claiming he has already been marked 4 times and that the flames of hell will consume him, commanding him to become his puppet as dark shadows encircle him. When all seems lost, Sakuya focuses and channels his aura. Atraya looks confused, and Sakuya retorts that he would never stand idly by to become a specter. Advancing against him, he remarks that burning his body has only made him feel lighter and begins cutting through the shadows. Shiraya orders the shadows to stop him and notices something odd. Sakuya should have exhausted all his countermeasures against the shadow state. Then he realizes Sakuya is using his 8-ship leap. Sakuya declares it's too late, strikes Shiraya, who switches with a clone using his technique. The battle continues as Sakuya vows to kill him before being transformed into a specter, cutting through clone after clone. Shiraya insists a single slash won't suffice, but Sakuya responds that if 1 blow isn't enough, he will keep striking until Shiraya falls. With his final attack, Sakuya lands a decisive hit, and Shiraya concedes defeat as Sakuya declares victory. After taking down a boy from Sora's father's guild outside the arena, Rukai scoffs at the fight, calling it a disgrace for an Esra and urges, insisting they come quickly or it'll end disappointingly. Meanwhile, Sora leaps across city rooftops, returning to the scene. Juro, observing, celebrates prematurely, but Chwini warns that something is off. The malice rising now far surpasses anything from Hades before. Juro, confused, asks what he means as black lightning surges from Shiraya's body lying near Sakuya. Shocked, Shiraya insists he hasn't lost and pleads for 1 more chance. Suddenly, space tears open and 2 skeletal hands emerge, ripping through and revealing a skeleton wreathed in dark energy. Sakuya freezes, stunned by the sight, questioning what it could be. The decapitated Shiraya begs for another chance, but the skeletal figure grabs his head and declares that mere skill won't win, strength matters above all, yet it's too late for both him and his enemies, crushing Shiraya's head like a watermelon. Sakuya remains tense, realizing this might be Hades' Esra's true form, while his allies recoil, uncertain of the monstrous being before them. Richt watches from outside, a sinister smile on his face, commenting that things are spiraling out of control. Hades' Esra reveals that when he first became an Esra, the first person he killed was his own brother, and since then he has lost count of those he's slain. Anyone who dies becomes his puppet. Shiraya's spirit takes shape among them, and Hades' Esra warns Sakuya the same fate awaits him, striking his forehead. A mark appears where he was hit, displaying Hades' brand 1. Surprised, Sakuya thinks the mark should have vanished after Shiraya's death, and notices his 8-ship leap is still on cooldown, wondering if this is the end. Evil spirits swarm him, forcing him to defend with his sword, the sensation unnervingly familiar. A flashback shows him struggling against a spider monster, powerless to stop it while it attacks his comrades. Despite the hopelessness, he resolves that he can't fall until everyone is safe, directing the others to flee while trying to draw the monster's attention. Realizing normal attacks won't work, he spots a weak point and hurls his sword into its head, finally attracting its focus. He taunts it to come at him, but the monster strikes him with a leg, sending him crashing to the ground. Facing it with all 6 eyes fixed on him, he thinks at least he's saved some people and laments not being stronger. Just as the monster is about to strike again, a voice calls out, urging him not to give up, and the hero arrives to aid him. Sakuya reflects on how narrowly he escaped death, recalling that it was then he encountered the legendary Kurasa Tengu, a master who had trained the warlords of old. In that moment, he realized that not only had monsters entered this world, but legendary heroes had also descended. Sakuya sits on the ground, catching his breath after escaping the spider monster, while the hero stands before him. He thanks him for saving his life and asks his name. The hero introduces himself as Karasotanu and explains that, by the will of a fallen warlord, he has been searching for someone worthy to inherit both his name and the sword, Spider Cutter. The hero recounts how the spider demon, once slain, had returned with a deep grudge, ambushing him and driving a claw into his back. He managed to strike its head with the sword but couldn't finish it, and both had fallen in the fight. Seeing Sakuya risk his life for a stranger, he realized he was the key to resolving the threat. Together, he believed they could kill the spider and reclaim the warlord's sword. Sakuya grasps his hand, agreeing gladly, and from then on, Karasotanu trains him relentlessly. Thanks to him, Sakuya masters the heroic soul's legend, though he lacks full talent to inherit the warlord's entire legacy, mastering only 3 of 6 abilities, enough to defeat the spider together. The fight against the spider had been merciless. Using one of his 3 mastered abilities, the 8-ship leap, Sakuya managed to bring it down, decapitating it with a final strike. Afterwards, Karasotanu entrusted him with the spider cutter, Hamaru, and made a promise: if anyone more worthy of the sword ever appeared, he would send them to Sakuya with the blade in hand. Sakuya swings the sword against the endless evil spirits, admitting he never imagined being worthy of such a weapon, but knowing he must borrow its power to survive and honor the promise to the man who saved him. Summoning the hero's sword, a white aura envelopes him, blocking the spirits. Juro watches in doubt, wondering if the sword alone can defeat that monster. Behind Sakuya, the hero's spirit stands firm. Dami scoffs that hero or not, he is still human, and no mortal weapon could slay a god. Hades eyes the sword, noting the aura, questioning if he truly fears it, then commands all his evil spirits to attack. Yet Sakuya, protected by the white aura, asserts that the warlord who wielded this blade to slay the spider passed on a power that suppresses evil. One spirit resembling a mage casts a spell, but Sakuya blocks the mage's spell with his sword, admitting he isn't sure how effective it will be against the god of the underworld, but resolves that if he channels all his malice into it, he can succeed. Another spirit fires an arrow into his leg, wounding him, while more close behind prepare to strike. Summoning the Conqueror's Haki, he roars to the spider cutter, and the sword slashes through, disintegrating several evil spirits. Hades watches, acknowledging his strength but warning he is still far from being a match. Sakuya strikes Hades' circular shield, which activates to parry his blow, and Hades mocks him, asking if he truly believed a human hero's weapon could overcome his defenses and declaring that he will turn his foolish hope to ashes. One of Sakuya's slashes hits the shield, producing an unbearably loud sound that makes Hades flinch, forcing Hiro and Dagami to cover their ears, and the same affects Sakuya's wife and his 2 friends. The shield begins to crumble under the impact, and Hades struggles, covering one ear with his hand while keeping the shield active with the other, but it eventually shatters completely. Sakuya tells him that while he can block the spider cutter hammer's blade, he cannot block the sound waves it unleashes. Noticing Hades in evident distress, Sakuya dashes forward toward his head, moving past his arm, and explains that the sword emits roar-like sound waves that disturb enemy movements. Observing Hades' weakened state, he realizes the sword's effect has already kicked in and declares this is their chance. While Hades warns that using sound to paralyze him is not enough to celebrate, calling Sakuya a foolish mortal. Sakuya closes in on Hades' head, but a warning appears noting that the spider cutter hammer's effect duration is halved from 20 to 10 seconds due to divine blessing. Hades taunts him, saying the moment he thinks he's won is when he's weakest. Sakuya urges himself to move faster, knowing this is his last chance, but as he nears Hades, the god turns his head and declares he's snapping out of the paralysis. Sakuya leaps into the air to strike, and Joro watches anxiously, wondering if he'll make it. Just as he's about to land the hit, Hades seizes full control of his body, blocking him midair and grabbing him with one hand while laughing, crushing him, and declaring he will turn him into an undead puppet. The text of Hades' brand levels 2, 3, and 4 flashes, signaling the impending transformation. Suddenly, Hades notices Sakuya's wife, Juro, and Shuenji channeling their power to aid him, his wife insisting they cannot stand idle. Athena materializes, warning that no one may interfere in a sacred battle, but she freezes as lightning strikes above. She turns, asking who is attacking, and Hayo and Dagami detect the vibrations as well, noting someone is breaching the barrier that the chief was meant to guard. Lightning crashes down, shattering Athena's shield, and Dami exclaims in shock that the barrier has been broken and questions if the lightning belongs to the boss. The hero looks up and tells Dagami to watch, revealing Sora's return, wielding Zeus's lightning spear and destroying the shield. Sora announces he arrived just in time, leaving Dagami stunned, pointing out that only the boss could wield that lightning spear. The three manage to cast a protective shield around Sakuya while Juro and Shuenji note the barrier is down, and they must defend their master. Sakuya's mother urges him, saying they're counting on him. Sora fires a bolt of lightning directly at Hades' face, shattering part of his skeletal head. Hades screams in pain, cursing furiously, but scoffs at the broken barrier and tightens his grip on Sora's father, claiming he is already one of his puppets. Juro uses his power to lift a rock mass, giving Sora a platform to launch himself toward Hades. Using the momentum, Sora strikes decisively at the arm holding his father, severing it in one blow. Hades screams in agony as his father falls, and Sora immediately pulls him to safety, declaring that as long as he's there, no one will die. Sora, worry etched on his face, glances at his father in rough shape and tells him he did well holding on this long. His attention shifts to the real threat, the figure outside the barrier unleashing lightning bolts. Among everyone he's met since leaving the abyss, Sora recognizes him as the strongest. He recalls Richt Mukai's words before the barrier broke, "So you did come back, Sora Mukashima." Sora strikes head-on with his lightning spear, piercing him, but it has no effect. Puzzled, he notes it's odd the lightning caused no harm, and even stranger how effortlessly the man handled his power, which explains Athena's shattered shield. Carrying his father to his mother and friends, he reminds himself this isn't the time to dwell. He must take him down first. Richt Mukai hovers above, snake-like eyes watching, a serpent's figure looming behind him, murmuring that it's interesting. Hero laughs at the barrier's fall, joking that they no longer have to follow the rules, calls Shuenji a bald monk, and launches a punch at him. Dagami, looking up at Richt, finds it odd their boss isn't restraining Hero and wonders if he's assessing the kid's true strength, realizing she can't just stand idle either. She summons a golden shield and snaps at Agaya, asking how long he plans to just watch. He tells her to mind herself and adds that an assassin appears when timing is perfect, revealing his power to become invisible. Dami urges Sharia, who has only lost an arm, to join the fight. He responds that nobody escapes death and sends a swarm of evil spirits towards Sora's family. Sora calls out to Juro, telling him to leave his father and the others to him. Juro nods, punches the ground, and forms a protective barrier around himself and Sora's parents as the spirits approach. Sora readies himself, vowing to eliminate anyone who touches his father or the others. Shuanji battles Hero, who curses him constantly, until Sora appears above them, charging a strike. Hero, startled by Sora's speed, summons teeth from his hands to defend himself and warns not to underestimate him, but Sora shatters the teeth and sweeps him away with a single blow. Dami notes he didn't resist even one strike, calling him an idiot. Sora instructs Shwini to handle the spirits, and he complies, using his powers to stop them. Dagami observes Sharia being completely outmatched by the monk and wonders if it's a matter of compatibility. Then she targets Sora, hurling the Valkyrie's shield, which he stops effortlessly with one hand. She laments facing such a monster but has no choice, summoning a sword and aiming at him. Sora dodges, grabs her wrist, and strikes with the Valkyrie's shield, forcing her to release the sword. He follows with 2 or 3 precise strikes to her face using the shield. Bleeding from her nose, she wonders why the boss hasn't acted yet. From above, Richt watches and scoffs, calling them pathetic trash. As he readies a lightning strike with a massive bow, he reminds himself they're under the curse of frailty and, with a smile, dedicates the attack to Mikajima's wife. Shuenji, guarding Sora's parents, senses powerful divine energy targeting Yuwa and admits it's reckless but necessary. He removes the bandage from his eyes, begins his prayer, and announces, "Dharma, I open," intending to activate the Dharma form as quickly as possible. Richt mocks him, calling him a fool and warning he won't finish his chant like Hiro. Shuinji mutters that this is trouble, while Richt, disgusted, calls him an insect and fires the lightning from the giant bow straight at the stone shield Juro had created to protect Sora's parents. The blast of electricity rips through the field, forcing Sora to shield his face as smoke swirls around. When it clears, he spots his mother's hand buried beneath the rubble and rushes forward, calling out to her, but a woman intercepts and strikes him. Rage surges as he shouts not to block his way, yet his blow fails to pierce her shield. She charges with renewed vigor, fists raised, but he catches her strike, startled by her overwhelming strength. As she presses forward, she taunts that his mother's fading curse means her death, igniting his fury as he hurls her away and storms toward the rubble. She smirks, convinced he has lost his will to fight, and launches a lightning arrow into his back, piercing his body as its energy spreads to consume him. Gritting his teeth, he staggers under the assault while she assumes victory, but her skin reveals a terrifying truth. He carries divine power surpassing even the gods, a black holy force that devours everything it touches and turns it into his strength. Though raw and untamed, she realizes why her boss ordered his death, summoning shield and spear with a cry to kill him as a massive cursed figure rises from the ground, surrounding him with enemies ready to strike. Yet Sora sees nothing but his mother's hand trembling beneath the stones, tears filling his eyes as her fingers twitch. Alarmed that she still lives, the woman binds him with soul chains, but his mother reaches for him and he grasps her hand, shattering the seals. Relief shatters into grief when he realizes she has already passed, his cry of denial echoing in despair. In madness, he clings to her, but then she touches his chin with fading warmth, whispering that he must stop, that he must not grieve for her but escape and walk his own path. Sora crushes the weapon in his grip, leaving the man stunned that a knife forged from divine power could shatter so easily. Without pausing, Sora charges forward, dark energy swirling wildly around him, while the woman stares in disbelief, muttering that he broke a divine blade with nothing but his hand and warning the others not to face him directly. Consumed by rage, he slams his fist against her shield, gripping it tightly as he growls that he will rip her apart. The woman clenches her teeth, realizing he is absorbing their divine power to grow stronger. Sora, furious and brimming with energy, charges at her. She shouts for everyone not to use their power, but in a blink, he is already in front of her. She cannot dodge and is blasted away by his massive fist. Watching in shock, another man wonders who this monster is, but Sora notices him as well. Though invisible, he realizes Sora can see him. Stunned, the man thinks it impossible that not only is Sora stealing divine power, but also piercing his stealth. From below, a beast mocks that while Sora is brawling, his mother lies on the brink of death, abandoned by her son, a disgrace. Just then, Monk tackles the beast, but it roars back, calls him pathetic, and fires its weapon. Gritting his teeth, Sora abandons the invisible man and turns toward Monk, giving his foe relief at the distraction. Sora rushes to his mother, but the beast leaps from above to strike. He braces, thinking what to do, and when the dust clears, he stands firm, shielding his mother. The beast sneers that he can absorb divine power and demands to see how much. It unleashes Death Flame, its overwhelming force pushing Sora back. Allies cry out that feeding him more power is useless, that neither divine force nor close combat works. Sora shouts that it is all in vain, yet stones behind him suddenly levitate. The woman twists her power, declaring that if divine energy cannot hurt him, she will embed it into hardened stones, faster than bullets, enough to kill his dying mother. Rocks rise, glowing as they soak up divine power. Sora struggles to dodge every strike, determined not to let any touch his mother, but countless stones batter him. The woman laughs, telling him to burn himself out, then rallies everyone to join her. With a scream for Sora to die, she hurls massive chunks at once. Sora dodges frantically, but the storm is too dense, some stones crashing into his mother despite his desperate defense. She cries out to Sora, telling him it's okay and he doesn't need to go this far, but he shouts back that he will defeat them, because if he cannot even protect his family, then life has no meaning. His opponent sneers that such love is touching. Above, a man rises with his bow, snarling that Sora makes him sick. He declares that absorbing divine power is pointless, then summons Atropus's shears in his hand, announcing it as the relic of the goddess who severs fate itself, capable of cutting through any divine power. With a stroke, he severs his bowstring and fuses the shears into it, declaring that Sora's fate ends here. Blue energy fuses with yellow lightning, forming a devastating blast in the sky. The monk coughs under the crushing divine pressure, thinking this is bad and urging Sura to run. But the man presses a dagger to his head, mocking whether Sura has time to worry about others. Sura grits his teeth in panic, unable to grasp what is happening. From behind, his mother calls to him, handing him a small pouch with trembling hands, reminding him that they love him always. Then the massive strike descends from the heavens, crashing down upon Sura. A system screen flashes. Operation Tazuz completed, the god is satisfied. The attacker lands on the ground as the woman asks if Sura truly died. He replies that Zeus has accepted his offering, and that is what matters. Their concern now is that their actions here will be seen as a declaration of war against the other guild, so they must prepare. Meanwhile, Sura's body lies broken, cast into a lake, sinking unconscious as the water pulls him deeper into the dark.